The rhythm of the saffron and slate was a jackhammer against my temples. It wasn't the usual Friday night clatter of plates and polite conversation. This was the sound of money, a deep, booming roar of men who owned things. The East Tide Commerce League had finished their conference, and now they were here, turning our upscale fusion restaurant into a trading floor, shouting deals over designer cocktails. My name is June Park. I'm 26 years old. For the last 8 hours, my feet felt like they'd been smashed flat with a meat tenderizer. I pivoted around a server carrying a tray of smoking appetizers, the scent of lemongrass and saffron burning my nose. Outside, through the frosted glass of the main doors, I could see the hulking, blurred shapes of the North Star Guardians. They were the private security for the conference, standing around in expensive suits, looking bored and dangerous. They weren't here to protect us. They were here to protect them. Every time I reached into my apron for my order pad, my fingers brushed against the sharp, folded edge of the official summons. It felt heavier than the stack of dirty plates I was carrying. Civic Integrity Bureau, a polite name for the people who ruined lives. The summons wasn't even really about me. It was about my manager, Bren Walsh, and his magical ability to make our credit card tips vanish into thin air. But the CIB letter was brutally clear: show up and testify about the tip fraud, or be charged as an accomplice. If I testified, Bren would fire me on the spot. If I didn't, I'd lose my job anyway, and maybe face charges. And then there was the text from my landlord, the one that had made my stomach freeze solid this morning. Just a picture of a heavy-duty padlock. I was 2 months behind on rent. My little sister, Mina, was depending on me. I was trapped. I needed this job, but this job was killing me. The restaurant was a sea of roaring laughter and clinking glasses, but one sound cut through the chaos like a razor, a high, thin wail. I scanned the room. Over at the VIP booth, the big one tucked away against the dark oak-paneled wall, a little boy was crying. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. He had his small hands pressed hard over his ears, his shoulders rigid, his face buried in the plush velvet of the seat. He was terrified. 2 men in dark suits, built like refrigerators, stood at the adjacent table. They were staring straight ahead, acting like the child's distress was nothing more than a buzzing fly. The man sitting in the booth with the boy was different. I'd only seen him from the back when I seated them broad shoulders that strained the fabric of a fine, black wool coat. He wasn't in a suit like the conference sharks. He didn't need to be. He just sat there, perfectly still, and tilted his head slightly, a silent question aimed at the crying child. As I moved closer, obligated to take their water order, the sweeping spotlight from the bar washed over their table. It illuminated his face. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a human face. It was a sculpture carved from unforgiving stone. Hard angles, a strong jawline, a mouth that looked like it had never known how to smile, and eyes that were closed against the noise. I knew who he was. Everyone in Ardendale's Harborline district knew, even if they only spoke his name in whispers. Cassio Marcellin? The name tasted like iron and the cold brine of the Atlantic, the Marcellin Syndicate. He wasn't just a guest. He was the shadow that owned the ground the restaurant was built on. The little boy, Nico, let out another desperate, hiccuping sob. The sound twisted something in my chest. I knew that kind of bone-deep panic. It was the sound of being small and overwhelmed. Protocol said not to engage the VIPs unless spoken to. Protocol could go to hell. I detoured to the service station. Ignoring Bren's glare, I poured a glass of warm water, not hot enough to scald, not cold enough to shock. I grabbed a stack of our thickest paper napkins. When I returned to the booth, Cassio Marcellin's eyes opened. I forced myself to keep my gaze on the boy. I crouched down low, so I was at his eye level. The 2 guards at the next table tensed, their hands moving inside their jackets. Marcellin just watched. "Hey there," I said, my voice soft, trying to pitch it beneath the roar of the room. Nico flinched, curling into a tighter ball. "It's loud in here, isn't it?" I murmured. "It hurts my ears, too." I set the warm water on the table, just out of his reach. "I know a secret," I whispered. I took one of the thick napkins. My hands were shaking, just a little, but the old, familiar motions took over. A fold here, a sharp crease there, a tuck under. My mother had taught me this, back when her hands were still steady, in seconds. It wasn't a napkin anymore. It was a little fox, with a pointed snout and two sharp ears. I slid it gently across the polished wood table until it stopped right in front of him. Nico peeked through his fingers. "This is Mr. Fox," I whispered. "He really hates the noise, but he loves magic smoke." I nudged the glass of warm water closer. "See this?" I leaned over the rim of the glass and blew a gentle, steady breath across the surface. A small, perfect puff of steam, the magic smoke curled into the air. You have to blow the smoke for the Mr. Fox so he feels safe." Nico hesitated. His little shoulders were shaking. He slowly, agonizingly, lowered his hands from his ears. He took a shaky, wet breath and blew. A tiny plume of steam rose. His crying hitched, then stopped. He blew again, a little harder this time. A bigger puff. A tiny, watery smile touched the corner of his mouth. His eyes, swollen and red, were suddenly wide and bright. He had stopped crying. Only then did I feel the weight of the man's stare. I slowly straightened up and met it. Cassio Martellin's eyes were gray, not the soft, cloudy gray of a foggy morning. They were the color of steel, of the Ardendale sky just before a blizzard. They were sharp, analytical, and utterly cold, like a surgeon's scalpel, dissecting me layer by layer. He wasn't looking at my face or my uniform. He was looking into me, weighing my motives, assessing my patience, judging my courage. June Table 12 has been waiting for their check for 5 minutes. I jumped. The fragile spell shattered. Bren Walsh was gliding over, his face stretched in that fake, oily smile he reserved for the high rollers. "So sorry for the disturbance. Mr. Marcelin," Bren oozed, ignoring me completely. "Park, stop bothering the guests and get back to your section now." I stood up, my face burning with humiliation. I was just calming the... Now. As I turned, my shoulders stiff, I watched Bren walk back to the manager's station. I saw him swipe the cash tip from table 9, a crisp $50 bill left for Maria, and, with a motion so practiced it was almost invisible, slip it into his own pocket. He didn't put it in the pooled employee tip jar. He put it in the locked cash drawer beneath the register, the one only he had the key to. My stomach churned with a sudden, sour anger. That was my rent money. That was Mina's bus pass and art supplies. That was the CIB summons waiting to explode in my pocket. It happened faster than I could process. A drunk from the conference crowd, weaving his way back from the bar, stumbled hard near the VIP booth. He was loud, obnoxious, and pointing. "Hey," he slurred, jabbing a finger toward Marcelin. "I know you. You're that guy, the fixer." The 2 guards moved, but the drunk was already off balance. He waved his arm, maybe for emphasis, maybe just to catch himself. His hand, holding a heavy, half-full rocks glass, flew wide. It was heading right for the booth, right where Nico sat. I just moved. I threw myself forward, planting my feet between the drunk and the table, turning my body to shield the boy. The glass shattered against the high oak divider, an explosion of crystal and whiskey, but not before the sharp, broken edge of it caught my forearm. A sharp, stinging heat, then a sudden, wet cold. The entire restaurant went silent for a single, stunned heartbeat. The drunk stared, dumbfounded at the mess. Nico was silent, his eyes wide with a fresh, raw terror. I looked down at my arm. A clean, 3-inch slice was welling up with dark red blood. It wasn't a gusher, but it was deep. It dripped, thick and slow, onto the polished hardwood floor. Cassio Marcelin hadn't flinched. He hadn't stood up. He hadn't even raised his voice. He just lifted one finger, a slight, almost invisible gesture. The two guards, who had been moving toward the drunk, were suddenly on him. It wasn't violent, it was terrifyingly efficient. One man on each arm. They weren't grabbing him, they were supporting him, as if helping a dear friend who'd had a bit too much. "Sir, let's get you some air," one of them murmured, his voice flat. "And the bill," the other one said, his voice just as devoid of emotion. "For this entire section, the gentleman insists on paying for everyone's trouble." In less than 10 seconds, the drunk was gone. His platinum credit card already swiped and returned. No shouting, no struggle, no scene. He was just erased. The silence that followed was heavier and louder than the noise had been. I was clutching my arm, trying to stem the flow of blood with a useless cocktail napkin, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break a rib. Cassio Marcelin turned his head. His steel-gray eyes met mine. His voice was the first thing I'd heard from him. It was deep, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the wood of the booth itself. It held no accent I could place, just a quiet, absolute authority that demanded to be obeyed. He spoke only 5 words. "He needs a mom." The words just hung there in the air, cold and heavy. It wasn't an observation. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact, as cold and hard as his gaze. I felt my lungs seize. What did that even mean? Bren, smelling an opportunity to suck up, scurried over, holding the restaurant's cheap, plastic first aid kit. "Mr. Marcelin, my deepest apologies, a terrible incident, children. You know," he tittered, that disgusting, fake little laugh. "Such spoiled brats when they're tired, causing all this fuss." The air temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Cassio's eyes narrowed to slits. Nico, who had been staring at my bleeding arm, flinched violently at Bren's words and pressed himself back into the corner of the booth, making himself as small as possible. That was it. The glass, the pain, the rent, the CIB, the stolen tips, and now this. It all boiled over. "He's not a brat," I snapped. My voice was shaking, but it cut through the silence. "He's a child. This place is too loud, and that man was drunk and scary. He was scared, not spoiled." Bren's face went from pale to a blotchy, furious purple. "Park, you're fired. Get out." "Are you sure you want to do that, Bren?" I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous level I didn't even know I possessed. "Because I've got a CIB summons right here in my pocket, and I've also got 2 months of security footage from my phone, clearly showing you skimming tips from every single server on this floor. You fire me, and I walk straight from here to the bureau. I'll be there by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We can see whose life ends first." Bren's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. He looked from my bloody arm to Cassio's terrifyingly calm face, and he knew he was trapped. Cassio Marcelin watched the entire exchange. He hadn't moved a muscle. He turned his gaze back to me. His expression was completely unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached inside his wool coat. He didn't pull out a wallet. He just produced a single card. It was matte black, solid, heavy, no name, no numbers, just a gold chip embedded in the center. He slid it across the table. It stopped right by my hand, which was now wrapped in a blood-soaked napkin. "For the cut," he said, "that same quiet rumble." I stared at the card. It looked more expensive than my entire apartment. Then I looked at Nico. The little boy was clutching the napkin fox to his chest with both hands, his eyes fixed on me. I gently reached out with my good, non-bleeding hand and rested it on his hair. It was soft as silk. "You're okay, sweetie. See, all gone. No more scary, man." When I looked back at Cassio, something in his expression had changed. The ice in his eyes had thawed, maybe 1 degree. Just 1. It wasn't warmth. It was acknowledgement. I realized 2 things at once. First, when that glass shattered, when the real danger appeared, Cassio Marcelin hadn't blinked, not once. Second, while he hadn't moved to comfort the boy himself, his gaze had never left him until he was calm. He was watching, always watching, a silent, powerful guardian. The shift from hell finally ended at 2 a.m. Bren had avoided me for the rest of the night, his face pale and furious. My arm was throbbing, wrapped in a thick layer of gauze from the kitchen's first aid kit. The black card was in my apron pocket, pulsing with a strange weight, feeling heavier than the CIB summons had been. I was wiping down the last table when one of the refrigerator-sized guards approached me. "Mister, Marcelin's car is waiting," he said. It wasn't a question. "The driver will take you home." "Oh, no, I couldn't," I stammered, my mind already calculating the minutes until the last bus. "I take the bus. I'll be fine." If I missed it, it was a 4-mile walk through Harbor Line. "It wasn't a request, miss." I bristled. "I can take care of myself." "He knows," the guard said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. The boy insisted. I looked past him. Through the restaurant's front glass, a sleek black car was idling at the curb. It wasn't just a car, it was an ArcLight V12, a machine so expensive I'd only ever seen them in magazines. It looked like a Panther. All silent power. In the back window, tinted so dark I could barely see inside, I could just make out a small silhouette, a tiny hand lifted, clutching a crumpled white shape. The napkin fox. I thought about the dark, 4-mile walk home. I thought about the eviction notice. I thought about the CIB and the stolen tips and Bren's face. I looked at the small hand in the window. My fate, which had been rattling around like a loose screw all night, suddenly clicked into place. "Okay," I whispered, untying the strings of my apron. "Okay, I'm coming." The ArcLight V12 didn't make a sound. It was like sitting inside a void, a bubble of impossible quiet moving through the loud, wet heart of Ardendale. The leather of the seats was buttery and smelled faintly of wool and cold air his scent. Outside, the Harbor Line district streaked past, a blur of neon watercolor bleeding onto the slick, black pavement. This city, my city, looked different from inside this car. It didn't look like a place of struggle. It looked like a backdrop. Ardendale loves a good tragedy, as long as it stays on the other side of the glass. The car glided to a stop, its silence somehow louder than the rattling exhaust of the bus I usually took. We were at Rowan Row. The name was a cruel joke, meant to evoke images of quaint townhomes. It was a 5-story brick shoebox, weeping rust from its fire escapes, the streetlight above the door buzzing like a dying insect. The ArcLight 512 looked like a panther that had mistakenly wandered into a scrapyard. The driver, a man whose face I hadn't seen, was out of the car before I could find the handle. He opened my door, the motion smooth and practiced. "I can get it," I muttered, sliding out, my apron wadded in my hand. The gauze on my forearm was already stiff. "Mrs." Petrov was on the stoop, huddled in her threadbare robe, a cigarette glowing in the dark. Her eyes, usually dull with fatigue, went wide as saucers when she saw the car, then they narrowed, landing on me. "They took the wrong one," she hissed as I climbed the steps, her voice a cloud of smoke and suspicion. "The MGS just grabbed the wrong kid, right off the street, swore he was the one from the alley. Took him 3 hours to admit they messed up and let him go." I flinched. The Metropolitan Guardian Service? Another organization with a pretty name. My hand tightened on the meager roll of cash tips in my pocket. The real tips. The ones I'd managed to hide before Bren's greedy hands swept the table. A city where they just grabbed kids. "June." His voice startled me. Cassio Marcelin hadn't stayed in the car. He was standing on the sidewalk, looking up. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my building, his gaze tracking the cracked windows and the third step from the top, the one that was split clean in two. He looked at the broken step, then at me. His steel-gray eyes were impossible to read in the gloom. "What are you stuck in? June Park?" The question was too big. It wasn't just the step. It was the CIB summons in my pocket, the eviction notice on my phone, the blood drying on my arm. It was my whole life. I couldn't explain that avalanche. I gave him the only answer I had, time. He nodded, a single, sharp motion, as if I'd confirmed a complex equation. "I have time," he said. his voice a low rumble that cut through the night air, but only for those who know how to use it. Before I could even begin to unpack that, the tinted back window of the arc light slid down with a faint whisper. Nico, and he was bundled in his seat, his small face pale. He leaned forward and held up the crumpled napkin fox I'd made him. "My fox likes you," he whispered. The words were clear, not a wail or a sob. It was the first coherent sentence I'd heard him speak. It hit my heart with a physical jolt, stronger than any punch. The window slid back up, sealing him away. The car pulled away from the curb, its engine a ghost, and disappeared into the wet darkness. I climbed the 5 flights, each step groaning under my weight. Our apartment smelled like boiled cabbage and my sister's turpentine. I unlocked the 3 deadbolts and eased the door open. Mina was asleep on the pull-out sofa, her face illuminated by the blue light of her laptop. She was 17, brilliant, and my only reason for doing any of this. Her textbooks for the Avalon Arts Institute were piled on the floor. Her partial scholarship, the one thin rope pulling us towards something better. I ran my arm under the cold tap in our galley kitchen, hissing as the water hit the gash. The black card Cassio had given me was on the counter, looking alien and dangerous against the peeling laminate. I didn't know what to do with it. You couldn't pay rent with a mystery card. I sat at our tiny, wobbling table and opened my laptop. The inbox glowed with a single, sickeningly red flag. Civic Integrity Bureau, final notice. I clicked it. The language was no longer polite. Failure to appear at the scheduled deposition will be interpreted as silent complicity under Statute 4.19. B charges may be filed accordingly. They weren't asking, they were threatening. My options paraded in front of me. 1, I testify. Bren fires me. My landlord evicts me and Mina. 2, I stay silent. The CIB charges me as an accomplice. I lose my job, I get a record, and we get evicted. Both paths ended in the street. June? Mina was sitting up, rubbing her eyes, her hair a wild tangle. She saw the gauze on my arm, then the look on my face. "What happened, did Bren?" "It's the CIB," I whispered, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. They're serious. They're going to charge me." Mina's face, usually so bright with art and music, just crumpled. "Oh, June, I did something so stupid. My blood went cold. "What, Mina? What did you do?" "It was Bren," she sobbed, pulling her knees to her chest. "He was being so nice, asking about my Avalon classes. He said he had a promotional opportunity. A quick live stream for a company called Radian Food and Entertainment." Radian. I knew them. They sponsored half the billboards in Harborline, pushing sugary, high-alcohol drinks. "He just wanted me to talk about their new flavored seltzers," she cried, the words tumbling out. "But June, they weren't seltzers. They were strong, and the people watching, in the comments they knew I was 17. They were asking how it tasted, if I liked getting dizzy, if I'd do more, and Bren just watched." "He used you," I whispered, a cold, sharp rage rising in my chest, worse than the pain in my arm. "He used my 17-year-old sister to promote alcohol to other kids." "The clip is out," she wept, her shoulders shaking. "Someone recorded it. Bren told me this morning he said if I said anything, or if you caused any more trouble about the tips, he'd send the clip to the Avalon board. They'd revoke my scholarship, June, for conduct unbecoming." The trap wasn't just closing, it had snapped shut, its steel teeth in my sister's future. Bren hadn't just stolen my money. He was holding my whole world hostage. My decision, which had been a panicked calculation of bad options, became perfectly clear. I wasn't just stuck in time. I was stuck in Bren's web, and to save Mina, I had to burn the whole thing to the ground. I had to testify, which meant I would be unemployed and homeless by Monday. I needed a safe place for us to land, just for a few days. Somewhere Bren couldn't find us. My mind didn't go to the MGS or the CIB. It went to a pair of steel gray eyes and a face carved from stone. It went to a little boy who hated noise and clutched a paper fox. I didn't sleep. At exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, My phone buzzed. A restricted number, a simple 4-word text. 3 p.m., Shatterglass Park. Shatterglass Park was another of Ardendale's cruel jokes. It was built on the foundations of an old glass factory, and the gravel paths glittered with pulverized green and brown fragments. It was where people went when they had nowhere else to be. The wind was sharp off the Atlantic, carrying the smell of salt and diesel. I saw them near the old drainage canal, where rainwater rushed toward the harbor. Cassio Marcellin was crouched by the water's edge, the hem of his expensive wool coat brushing the mud. Nico was beside him, bundled in a small, neat coat. They weren't folding foxes. Cassio was folding a boat from a piece of newspaper. He placed it carefully into the rushing water. The noise in the concrete culvert was loud, a constant low roar. Nico watched it, his hands jammed in his pockets. He wasn't covering his ears. "The boat likes the noise," I heard Cassio say, his voice that same low rumble. "The noise is just the river talking. It's helping the boat go fast." Nico watched the small paper vessel bob and weave, navigating the rapids until it disappeared around the bend. He was listening to the roar, and he was calm. Cassio stood as I approached. He didn't ask why I came. He knew. I didn't waste his time. "It's Bren. He's not just stealing tips. He used my sister. She's 17. He coerced her into promoting alcohol on a live stream. Now he's holding the video over her scholarship to Avalon. The CIB is threatening to charge me as an accomplice if I don't testify. I have to testify. But when I do, I'll be fired, and he'll try to ruin her. I need to protect her." He listened. His stillness was absolute, like a mountain absorbing a storm. He didn't interrupt. He just watched my face, his gaze analytical. When I finished, the only sound was the rushing water. "Are you ready to tell the truth to the CIB?" he asked. "Yes." There was no hesitation in my voice. "Good." He reached into his coat pocket. He didn't pull out money or the black card. He pulled out a single, plain silver key on a simple metal ring. "There is an organization," he said. "The Moon Pillow Trust. It provides temporary, secure housing for civilian witnesses, for people caught in the gears. A safe house, run by him." I stared at the key. "I can't," I said, my voice tight. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I can't take that. I don't want to owe—" I swallowed and said the word. "I don't want to owe the Mafia." His expression didn't change, but the air around him felt 10 degrees colder. "It is not the Mafia," he said, his voice flat and final. "It is me, and I do not deal in debt. I pay with preservation." His personal code, not a favor, a transaction. My testimony, which he clearly wanted, for reasons I couldn't guess, in exchange for my sister's safety. I was torn, my pride warring with my terror. Then I felt a small tug on my sleeve. Nico had stepped forward. He shyly, very gently, put his small, gloved hand in mine. "Will you come back?" he asked. His voice was small, but clear as a bell. I looked down at his face, at those big, dark eyes, and my resolve shattered. I squeezed his hand. "I promise," I said, my voice thick. "I still have to teach you how to fold a boat that can sail against the wind." Cassio watched us, his face unreadable. "Take the key, June," and he said, his voice softer now, but no less firm. "Bren has backing, the Gray Finch cartel. They don't like witnesses, and they don't care about scholarships." He held the key out. "Don't go home alone." I looked at the key, a simple piece of metal that represented a terrifying choice. I looked at Nico, who was still holding my hand. I thought of Mina's face, crumpled in tears. I was trying to untangle the knots in my own life, but the only thread being offered was attached to Cassio Marcellin's. I stepped into the labyrinth. I took the key. The key Cassio had given me was cold and heavy in my hand. It slid into the first lock of apartment 19B at the skyward tower with a well-oiled, expensive click. A second, heavier thump followed as I turned it again. The high-security deadbolt retracting. 2 locks, not the 3 rattling, rusted ones on my door at Row and Row, but 2 silent, serious pieces of steel. I pushed the door open, and Mina and I stepped inside. The apartment wasn't a palace, it was empty. The main room was dominated by a single, massive, floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the entire Ardendale harbor. The lights of the distant cargo ships were like fallen stars. The furniture was sparse. Minimalist, a low-gray sofa, a glass table, chairs that looked more like art than places to sit. Everything was shadow and glass and clean lines. But it was the silence that hit me first. "June," Mina whispered, her voice bouncing strangely off the hard surfaces. "This place it's like a hospital." "It's safe, Mina," I said, dropping our shared duffel bag. "And it's quiet." That night, I slept for 8 straight hours. I didn't wake up until the sun was streaming in over the bay, bathing the sterile gray room in gold. I sat up, disoriented. There were no sirens. No neighbors screaming, no rattling pipes, no landlord pounding on the door, just the distant, muffled sigh of the Atlantic. It was the sound of not being in trouble, and it was so unfamiliar it made my chest ache. The next evening, he came. He didn't knock. I heard the click-thump of the locks, a sound that already meant him, but he paused at the threshold, a courtesy, waiting for me to acknowledge him in the space he had provided. He wasn't wearing the heavy wool coat, just a dark Henley that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. He was carrying 2 paper grocery bags. "I assumed you were tired of restaurant food," he said. Mina, sensing the shift in gravity, gave me a wide-eyed look and disappeared into the small second bedroom with her art portfolio. Nico, who had been holding Cassio's hand, stepped inside and stood near the wall, his eyes on me. He was clutching the paper fox. In the kitchen, Cassio moved with an unexpected, quiet efficiency. He pulled out fresh fennel, a bag of clams, tomatoes, a crusty loaf of bread. Cassio Marcellin, the man who owned the city's shadows, was making seafood soup. An hour later, we sat at the glass table. The soup smelled incredible, rich with saffron and the sea. Cassio set a bowl in front of Nico, alongside a heavy, polished silver spoon. I watched Nico. The boy stared at the spoon. He reached for it, his small hand visibly trembling. His knuckles were white. Clink! His shaking fingers made the spoon tap against the rim of the ceramic bowl. The sound was tiny, barely audible. But Nico reacted as if a gunshot had gone off. He recoiled, his chair scraping violently against the floor. His hands flew up, slamming over his ears. His mouth opened in a silent, terrified "oh," his breathing hitching, preparing for that awful, panicked wail I'd heard at the Saffron and Slate. "Nico," Cassio said. His voice was firm, but I could hear the deep, banked frustration in it, the helplessness. "It is just a spoon. Eat." But the boy was already gone, spiraling down into that place of noise and memory. "Wait," I said, standing. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension. "It's the sound, the clinking, the metal." I went to the kitchen drawers. They were filled with matching, heavy, hotel-quality silver. Useless. I looked over at Mina's backpack. Slung over one of the minimalist chairs, I hurried to it, dug into the side pocket, past her charcoal pencils, and pulled out the set of bamboo utensils she always carried for her packed lunches. A wooden spoon. I knelt beside Nico's chair. He was rocking, his eyes squeezed shut. "Hey," I whispered. "Mister, Fox told me he hates loud, cold spoons." I held the wooden spoon in front of him. He didn't look. "He likes quiet, warm ones. See?" I took the spoon and tapped it gently against the side of his bowl. Thud, thud, a soft, dull, organic sound. Not a clink, a thud. Nico stopped rocking. He peeked through his fingers. I put the spoon in his hand. His skin was cold. "It's a quiet spoon," I said. "It won't make the scary noise." Slowly, agonizingly. He lowered his hands from his ears. He stared at the wooden spoon. He dipped it into the soup, his hand still shaking, but less now. He lifted it to his mouth. He swallowed. He looked at the spoon. Then he took another bite, and another. After a few minutes, his small shoulders, which had been up by his ears, finally relaxed. He finished the entire bowl. When he was done, he didn't move away. He did something that stopped my heart. He leaned his small body sideways, just enough to rest his head against my arm, right near the gauze bandage. A tiny, trusting weight that anchored me to the spot. I looked up. Cassio was watching. He wasn't looking at Nico. He was looking at me. His face was still, that sculpted mask, but the rigid line of his jaw had softened, the steel in his eyes, that cold, analytical gray, had been banked. It was replaced by something else, a flicker of warmth, deep and contained, like a pilot light in a storm. He saw me. The tension in the room broke, like a fever. Mina, sensing the change, came out of her room, her ukulele in her hands. She sat on the floor, a safe distance away, and began to strum. It was a soft, simple melody, full of hopeful, open chords. Nico's head popped up from my arm. He watched her fingers dance on the strings. Mina smiled, a real, bright Mina smile. "This one's called Harbor Lights," she said. As she played, Nico smiled. It wasn't a real smile, not with his mouth. It was a crinkling around his eyes, a sudden brightness. He lifted his hands and began to clap, but he made no sound. He just pressed his small palms together, silently, perfectly in time with Mina's strumming. This quiet, safe room, Cassio cooking, Mina playing, Nico clapping without a sound. It felt like a nest, woven from the most unlikely, broken branches. Later, after Mina had taken Nico to the second bedroom to show him the view of the city lights, Cassio and I stood by the massive window. The harbor was a carpet of glittering darkness. His mother, Cassio said, his voice low, not looking at me but at the lights. Her name was Lise Rialta. She was a dancer. The word hung in the air, cold and final. She was bright, he continued, his voice a low rumble. She loved noise, music, parties, the sound of the city. Nico, he gets his fear of sound from her, from the end. And his father, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He worked for me, the Seaward branch, our logistics arm. It's legitimate. He said the word with a hard emphasis. He was a good man. The Greyfinch cartel wanted our shipping lanes for their products. He refused to bend. Cassio's reflection in the glass was like a stone etching. They set a charge at the warehouse. An explosion. Liz was there, picking him up from a late shift, the noise of the metal. Nico was in the car, waiting for them. My God, the clink of the spoon. It was the sound of the world ending. Cassio turned from the window. The soft, quiet father was gone. The mask was back, all hard angles and cold resolve. Bren Walsh is a symptom, he said. The Greyfinch is the disease. They use people like your sister. They use debt. They use children. He looked at me, his gaze so intense it was a physical weight. I do not promise things I cannot deliver. June. But I will promise this. He stepped closer. His voice dropped to a vow, a vibration of absolute, terrifying conviction. Anyone who touches a child in my city, anyone who uses them as leverage, I will personally, methodically, declaw them. They will have no power, no protection, and nowhere left to hide. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a promise of erasure, and it didn't scare me. It made the air in my lungs feel solid. The kids were asleep. The apartment was finally, completely still. Cassio and I were in the kitchen, cleaning up. It was the most surreal, domestic dance of my life. I'd wash a bowl. He'd take it from my wet hands and dry it with a clean towel. We didn't talk. The only sounds were the running water and the soft thud of the ceramic bowls being stacked. I reached for the last bowl, the one he'd used, at the exact same moment he did. His fingers brushed mine in the warm, soapy water. His skin was rough, calloused, and electric hot. A static spark snapped between us, invisible and sharp. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to pull my hand back, but he caught my wrist, gently. His grip wasn't a restraint, it was a question. He turned my arm over, his thumb brushing the edge of the gauze bandage from the restaurant. The cut, he said. It wasn't a query, it was a statement. "It's fine," I managed, my voice thin. "Just a scratch." "You were fast," he said, his gaze fixed on my arm. "At the restaurant, you shielded him. You didn't think." "I didn't have time to think. I just moved." His thumb was still resting on the pulse point of my wrist. My heart wasn't hammering like it had at the restaurant. It was doing something worse. It was beating a slow, heavy thump, thump, thump that I could feel in my throat. He had to feel it. He looked up from my arm, and his eyes met mine. He let go. I felt unsteady, my knees weak. I turned to brace myself, leaning back against the cold, stainless steel of the refrigerator. It was a mistake. It trapped me. He didn't move away. He took a single, deliberate half-step closer. He was close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. I had to tilt my head back to look at him. He was a mountain, solid, immovable, and overwhelming. But his eyes were locked on mine, and they weren't cold, they were searching. He raised a hand, slowly, as if not to frighten a wild animal. He didn't touch my face. He didn't touch my hair. He rested his palm on the steel of the refrigerator, right next to my head. He leaned in, just an inch. The air between us was electric. It was a thick, palpable thing, a tension that pulled every nerve in my body taut. My breathing was shallow. I could smell the wool of his shirt, the faint, lingering scent of saffron from the soup, and that cold night air and iron scent that was just him. He could kiss me. I knew it. He would kiss me. And he stopped. He held himself there, his body a hair's breadth from mine, his gaze burning, but he stopped. He was giving me the space. He was waiting for me. He was respecting my tiny, cold, steel-back territory. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Through the kitchen window, I could hear the faint, rhythmic shush of the harbor, the sound of the waves breaking on the seawall 19 floors below. "I can hear the waves," I whispered. It was the only thing I could think to say. His gaze softened. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Sometimes," he said, his voice a low vibration that I felt in my chest. "The tide rises for the moon, just as I do for you." My face flushed hot. The poetry of it, coming from this man of stone, was a blow to my defenses. But I wouldn't be a passive object in his orbit. I wouldn't be a moon. I found my voice. "I'm not a breakwater," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not just something you crash against." His smile widened. It changed his entire face for one startling second. "I know." He leaned in. I closed my eyes, bracing for it. Instead, I felt a feather-light pressure, warm and firm, against my forehead. He rested his forehead against mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was an exchange, a promise, a sharing of breath and space that felt more intimate, more terrifying than any kiss could have been. We just stood there, breathing the same air, his hand braced by my head, my back freezing against the steel, and his forehead a point of impossible warmth. It lasted 5 seconds. It lasted an eternity. He pulled back. His eyes were clear. The moment was over. "Get your evidence for the CIB," he said, his voice all business again. The shift was dizzying. "Get your recordings of Walsh, your copies of the tip receipts. Be ready." He walked to the door and picked up his coat. "I'll leave before midnight," he said, not looking back. "I won't complicate your world. Not yet." And he was gone. The heavy click-thump of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed in the silent apartment. My knees finally buckled. I slid down the refrigerator until I was sitting on the cold kitchen floor. My heart was pounding. After a long time, I got up. I sat at the glass table. The city lights spread out before me like a field of diamonds. I opened my laptop. I opened a new file. Bren Walsh, CIB testimony. For weeks, I'd been secretly recording Bren on my phone. I had the audio file where he bragged about finessing the credit card tips. I had screenshots of the doctored spreadsheets he'd accidentally left open on the office computer. I started compiling it all, organizing the files, writing a clear, concise list of questions for the CIB. I wouldn't just walk in there. I would walk in there with an arsenal. I worked for hours, the adrenaline from Cassio's presence, from that almost kiss, fueling me. Just before I finally went to bed, I saw a slip of white paper had been pushed under my bedroom door. I picked it up. It was a child's drawing. On one side, a wobbly, orange shape with pointy ears, Mr. Fox. On the other, a small paper boat with a big sail, sailing on a scribble of blue waves. I smiled, a real smile, and put the drawing on the nightstand. I got into bed. The sheets were clean and crisp. I listened to the silence, to the faint, distant sigh of the ocean. I wasn't at Row and Row, listening for fights or sirens. I was in a fortress, 19 floors above the water. I felt, for the first time in my life, completely and utterly watched over. I fell asleep. Outside, beyond the glass, the infamous Harbor Line fog began to roll in from the sea. It crept between the buildings, thick and gray and silent, swallowing the city lights one by one, like a cold whisper of the storm that was just about to break. The glass gun building was all sharp angles and blue, reflective surfaces. It was designed to make you feel small and exposed, like an insect under a microscope. I sat in the sterile lobby for exactly 15 minutes, my folder of evidence a heavy, comforting weight on my knees. I hadn't seen Cassio since that night in the kitchen. That's strange. Shared breath against the refrigerator, but I felt his influence. He had arranged a car, a plain black sedan, to take me to the deposition. No arc light, no guards, just quiet, invisible support. Miss Park. Investigator Rhea Candell wasn't what I'd expected. She wasn't a jaded, cynical detective from an old movie. She was sharp, in her late 30s, with her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that allowed no stray hairs. She wore a crisp white shirt, and her office, unlike the rest of the building, was warm. It smelled faintly of peppermint tea. "Thank you for coming in. Please." She gestured to a chair. I sat. She didn't waste time. "You've brought the evidence you mentioned." I pushed the folder across her desk. The audio file of Bren was on a USB drive, clearly labeled, the spreadsheets I'd copied, the screenshots of the tip-skimming software. The dates I'd logged it was all in there. She spent 10 minutes reviewing everything. She didn't make a sound, just an occasional sharp HM. She plugged in the USB, put on a pair of headphones, and listened. I watched her eyebrows climb her forehead. She took the headphones off. "This is comprehensive. Miss Park, the audio file of Mr. Walsh admitting to finessing the credit card pool by, as he says, about 10% is particularly strong." She leaned back, her expression one of professional appreciation. She seemed decent. She seemed fair. I couldn't let him keep doing it," I said, "especially not after he involved your sister." Candell finished for me. I froze. "How did you—" "The CIB was already building a file on Radiant Food and Entertainment for their marketing practices," she said smoothly, "but we lacked a direct link to the Saffron and Slate's management. Your testimony connects them. You've timed this perfectly." She paused, tapping a silver pen on her desk in a sharp, impatient rhythm. "Tell me, Miss Park, who advised you to file your complaint today?" The question hung in the air, too specific, too sharp. Advised me. No one. I got the final notice. I knew it was the right time. "Of course." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. A happy coincidence. Then I realized with a jolt that my CIB deposition, my final notice, hadn't been a threat. It had been an invitation. Cassio hadn't just given me a safe house. He had cleared the path, pulling strings I couldn't even see. I left her office feeling a spike of adrenaline. I felt clean. I walked through the massive, echoing marble lobby, the sound of my sensible shoes clicking, my step lighter than it had been in years. I was almost to the main revolving door. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" The voice was a low, desperate hiss. I stopped. Bren Walsh was standing in front of me, blocking my path. He looked terrible. His skin was a pasty, sweating mess. His eyes bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. You ruined everything," he sputtered. "You and your little project." "You ruined yourself, Bren," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And you used my sister. You're done." A terrible, ugly smirk spread across his face. "Oh, am I done?" He pulled his phone from his pocket, his thumb hovering over the screen. "You just killed her future. I still have the file. June, the whole video. I'm sending it to the Avalon Arts Institute right now. They'll revoke her scholarship by noon. Let's see how smart you feel then." My blood went cold. This was it, the moment he'd threatened. I took my own phone from my pocket. He thought I was going to call someone. He laughed. I didn't make a call. I hit play on the audio file I'd given Candell, and I turned the speaker on. Bren's own voice, tinny and loud, suddenly filled the cavernous lobby, so I just finesse. About 10% from the credit card pool every single night the kids are too stupid to even notice. They're just happy to get cash. The lobby went silent. A CIB security guard at the main desk looked up, his hand moving to his belt. I raised my voice, making it clear and sharp so everyone could hear. "And now you're blackmailing me. Bren, in the lobby of the Civic Integrity Bureau, using a video of a minor you coerced. Is that what you want to tell Investigator Candell because she's right upstairs?" His face went from white to a deep, blotchy purple. He lunged, not at me, but at my phone. He never made it. It happened so fast I almost missed it. A dark blue, windowless van had squealed to the curb right outside the glass doors, its side door sliding open. 2 men in dark hoodies started to pile out. But they were too late. A black, immaculate SUV, one I recognized, had materialized at the curb, cutting off the van. 2 North Star Guardians, the same private security from the restaurant, stepped out. They weren't in suits. They were in tactical black uniforms. They didn't run. They just moved. One of them intercepted Bren's lunge, grabbing his arm in a grip that made him wince. "Sir, I think you're causing a disturbance," the guard said, his voice flat. The blue van's door slammed shut. It peeled out, disappearing into Ardendale's midday traffic. It was seamless, terrifyingly seamless. The North Star men weren't cops, but they had the authority of an army. They were Cassio's army. They escorted a sputtering, protesting Bren out of the lobby and onto the sidewalk. "Miss Park." I jumped. Investigator Rhea Candell was standing just behind me. She'd watched the entire thing from the steps. Her gaze was fixed on the North Star SUV as it pulled away, with Bren effectively detained in the back. She looked at me, her expression a careful, unreadable blank. "You keep interesting company." She stepped closer, and I could smell the sharp, clean scent of her peppermint tea. "He casts a long shadow, doesn't he, Mr. Marcellin?" She held out a simple, white business card, just her name, her title, and a number. "When you decide you want to get out of that shadow, call me. The CIB has resources for people in your situation, people who get in too deep." I took the card. My hand was shaking. As Candell turned and walked back toward the elevators, my phone buzzed in my hand, a restricted number. Cassio. "Hold fast. Don't come back alone. The car is waiting." I looked up, scanning the street through the wall of glass. For a split second, in the warped reflection of the building across the street, I thought I saw him, a tall, unmistakable figure in a dark wool coat, standing in an alley, watching. Then a bus passed. The reflection shifted, and he was gone. The same black sedan from this morning pulled up. I got in, my heart hammering, the adrenaline crashing, leaving me trembling. My phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was Mina. I almost choked on my panic. June, oh my God, you won't believe it." She was breathless, and she was crying, but they were happy tears. I could hear it. "What, Mina? What is it? Is it Bren? Did he send the file?" "No, I don't think so. I got an email from the dean at Avalon. From the dean himself," she shrieked. "Someone, they said, an anonymous benefactor just sponsored a brand new community outreach program. They want me to run it, teaching music theory to kids in the Harbor Line shelters on weekends." And June, she took a shaky, sobbing breath. "It comes with a full scholarship room and board. Everything, they're covering the whole thing. June, I'm safe. We're safe." Tears streamed down my face, not tears of fear, tears of pure, burning relief. A full scholarship. Mina was safe. She was safe. He'd done it. Cassio hadn't just paid for it. That would be too crude, too simple. He'd created a position for her, one that used her talents, one that gave her dignity. I pay with preservation. I was crying with gratitude. My head leaned back against the seat for the first time since my mother died. I felt like the path ahead wasn't a tangle, but a straight line. I could breathe. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I jolted upright. It wasn't my car. It was the building I'd just left. The fire alarm. A loud, synthesized voice blared from hidden speakers. "This is not a drill. Please evacuate the glass gun building immediately." My driver was already on his radio. "We're clear, but the target is on foot." People began to pour out of the building. CIB agents, admin staff, all mixed together in a sudden, panicked crowd. "What's going on?" I asked the driver. "Security protocol. Stay in the car, miss, park, lock the doors." He got out, his hand on an earpiece, and moved toward the crowd. I was alone. I watched the chaos, my heart suddenly tight. The CIB building was emptying. In the sudden, claustrophobic crush of bodies surging toward the street, someone stumbled hard against the side of the sedan. Right where I was sitting, a man in a gray hoodie. He looked at me through the glass. "Sorry, miss," he muttered, though I couldn't hear him. He slammed his hand against the window, as if catching his balance, and then he was gone, absorbed into the fleeing crowd. It took me a second to see it. Jammed into the rubber seal of the window, where he'd slammed his hand, was a thick brown manila envelope. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely roll the window down an inch to grab it. I ripped the flap. My stomach emptied. The relief, the hope, all of it evaporated, replaced by ice. It was a photograph, high resolution, a telephoto shot, sharp and clear. It was Nico. He was at Shatterglass Park. It must have been taken just this morning, before I met Cassio's driver. He was holding the little paper boat Cassio had made him, his head tilted back, looking up at the sky. He was so small, so innocent. Underneath the photo, a single line of text, cut from magazine letters, like something in a cheap horror movie. "Change your testimony. Find peace." They'd been watching him. They'd been watching all of us. This wasn't about Bren's tips. This was about Cassio. And they were using this beautiful, silent child to get to him through me. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for my phone. My fingers numb and useless. I hit redial on the restricted number. He answered on the first ring. No hello, just silence. They have a picture, I choked out, the words tearing my throat. "They have Nico, a photo, at the park. They said change my testimony." The silence on the other end was heavy, absolute, colder than the grave. When he spoke, his voice was pure ice. "Where are you?" In the car, outside the CIB, the fire alarm, it was a fake. Wasn't it a distraction? "Walk to the Verity Span Bridge, the East End, now." The line went dead. I didn't wait for the driver. I jumped out of the car and ran. I ran the 3 blocks, the wind from the harbor whipping my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. The Verity Span was an old iron and steel bridge, arching over the industrial canal, its girders groaning in the wind. I was there for maybe 30 seconds, my chest heaving before the black Arclight Vi-12 glided to a stop. Cassio got out. He was in his wool coat again, a fortress against the wind, his face a mask of controlled fury. He wasn't alone. A woman got out of the passenger side. She was tall, slim, and wore a severe, impeccably tailored suit that looked like armor. Her hair was jet black, cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes were the darkest I'd ever seen. She looked at me not like a person, but like a problem to be solved, a variable in an equation. "This is Amaya Vello," Cassio said, his voice flat. "She runs the Moon Pillow Trust, the envelope." I handed it to him, my hand shaking so violently I could barely let it go. He looked at the photo of Nico. His jaw tightened. He didn't get angry. He went perfectly, terrifyingly still. He closed his eyes for a single, long second. "They've marked him," he said. The words were a low growl, a promise of retribution. Amaya looked at the photo over his shoulder. Her face was granite. Gray Finch. This is their signature. Psychological pressure, not direct action. They're trying to leverage you, Cassio, through her. "They failed," Cassio said. He looked at me, his gaze so intense it pinned me to the spot. "They think you're a weakness. June, they don't know you yet." He looked at Amaya. "Move him. Moon Mist House. Full protocol." Amaya nodded once, sharp and clean, and her, "She stays with me." He turned back to me, the wind pulling at his coat, making it snap like a flag. "Amaya will handle Nico. He will be safer than the gold in Fort Knox. This is what she does. As for this," he tapped the envelope, "I will handle the dirt. You will stay clean. You will not change your testimony. You will not call Candell. You will do nothing." "I won't," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I won't let them use him. I won't pull back." He stepped closer. The world shrank to just the two of us on that howling bridge. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes beyond the ice, beyond the faint warmth. I saw respect. He raised his hand. I thought he might touch my face or my shoulder. Instead, he placed his large, warm palm on the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in the hair at my nape. It wasn't a caress. It wasn't romantic. It was an anchor. It was a claim, a silent, binding oath that said, "You are mine to protect. Hold fast," he whispered, the sound almost stolen by the wind. He let go, the warmth vanishing. He and Amaya turned to get back in the car. As they did, I heard it, a faint, high-pitched whine, like a mosquito in my ear. I looked up. Hovering about 50 feet above the bridge, its form blurring against the gray sky, was a small, black drone. It had no markings. Its single, red-light eye was fixed directly on us. It hung there for a second, capturing my face, capturing Cassio's hand on my neck, capturing Amaya and the arc light. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it zipped sideways and vanished into the gray, afternoon fog. They weren't just threatening. They were building a file. The high-pitched whine of the drone vanished, swallowed by the rising wind. The air, which had been cold and sharp, suddenly felt heavy and wet. "They've burned the skyward apartment," Cassio said. His voice wasn't angry. It was flat, decisive. The drone's appearance confirmed the apartment was no longer a sanctuary, but a target. "Amaya, we move, all of us. Seraph Glasshouse, now." "Cade." Amaya spoke into a microphone clipped to her lapel, her voice sharp. "Sweep the route. We're moving the entire package." Cade Illor. That was the name of the North Star guard who had intercepted Bren, the one who had looked at me with assessing, professional eyes. The storm that had been a distant threat all day broke. It wasn't a drizzle. It was a deluge. The first fat drops hit the iron girders of the Verity Span Bridge like tiny hammers. Cassio didn't wait. He guided me into the back of the arc light, his hand firm on my back, a silent, non-negotiable command. Amaya was in the front seat. We peeled away from the curb, leaving the bridge and the CIB building behind, plunging into the storm. I had grabbed Mina from the sedan in a frantic, whispered explanation. She was in the back with me now, her knees drawn to her chest, her face pale. I hadn't even had time to tell her about the scholarship. All she knew was that we were running again. The Seraph Glasshouse wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a botanical garden, tucked behind a nondescript commercial park. It was a sprawling series of interconnected glass and steel conservatories. The arc light drove right inside, the massive doors sealing behind us, shutting out the storm. We stepped out of the car into a different world. The air was warm, humid, and smelled of damp earth and citrus. The emergency lights were on, casting a dim, red glow over pathways lined with exotic trees. In the center, under a massive glass dome, was a grove of red-orange trees. Their dark green leaves and bright fruit looked alien under the red light. "We're safe here," Cassio said. "This facility is off-grid, secure." As if summoned by his words, the sound of the storm on the glass roof intensified. The rain, muffled from inside the car, was now a deafening, terrifying roar. It wasn't a shush, it was a tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat of 10,000 angry fists pounding on the glass above us. I heard it at the same time I felt it. A small body next to me went rigid. Nico. He had been moved to the arc light while I was at the CIB, a silent transfer I hadn't even known about. He stood frozen, his small hands flying up to cover his ears, his shoulders bunching up to his neck. His face, which had been so calm when he gave me the drawing, was a mask of pure, white terror. The noise, it was the metal, the clinking, the explosion. The rain on the glass was too much, too loud. "Nico," Cassio started, taking a step toward him. "Wait," I said. I dropped to my knees in front of him. "Hey, sweetie, it's okay. It's just the rain." He was already spiraling. His eyes squeezed shut, his breath coming in high, thin hisses. I looked around, frantic. My eyes landed on a stack of supplies near a potting bench, waxed paper, used for wrapping delicate grafts. I grabbed a sheet. My hands moved, folding, creasing. I pulled Nico, shielding his body with mine, into a small alcove under a massive leafy plant. The noise was slightly muffled here. I held the small, opaque paper roof just above his head. The deafening tat-tat-tat on the main roof was distant. The only sound now was the thud-thud-thud of the heavy drops hitting the paper just inches above us. It wasn't a clink. It was a thud, a soft, dull, safe sound, like the wooden spoon. "See?" I whispered, my mouth close to his ear. "That's not the scary noise. That's just the rain beats. It's a song. Let's count them." I tapped his small shoulder in time with the drops. Thud, 1. Thud, 2. Thud, 3. He stopped shaking. He slowly, so slowly, lowered his hands from his ears. He looked at the paper roof, then at me. "Thud, 4. Thud, 5. A tiny, watery smile touched his lips. He lifted one small finger and started tapping the rhythm on his knee. He was breathing again. He was present. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Across the conservatory, Cassio stood by the trunk of a red-orange tree. He had been watching, his entire body rigid, as if ready to absorb a blow. As Nico smiled, I saw Cassio's shoulders deflate. The tension didn't just leave him, it poured out of him. He visibly relaxed, his chest expanding as he took his first deep breath since the drone had appeared. Amaya was at his side, her eyes on a security monitor. She glanced from Cassio's face to me and Nico, huddled under our paper roof. "They are mending each other, Cassio," she said, her voice too low for me to hear, but I could read the movement of her lips in the red light. He didn't answer her. He just kept watching me. The moment was broken by the hiss of a radio. Cade Illor, the North Star team lead, strode in, rain streaming from his black tactical gear. "Sir, perimeter is secure," he reported, his voice all business. "But we found something. Outer gate, Sector 4, a logo, fresh spray paint." "Show me," Cassio said. Cade held up a tablet, a picture of the gate's control box. On it, a small, stylized stencil of a gray sparrow, a gray finch. "They weren't following us," Amaya said, her voice lethally cold. "They were already here, waiting." As the words left her mouth, the world ended. Click! The red emergency lights, the humidifiers, the security monitors, everything went black. Utter, complete darkness. So total it felt like a physical weight. The only sound was the pounding, pounding, pounding of the rain, 1,000 miles above us in the dark. A single heartbeat of silence. Thwump! A new set of lights clicked on. Not red, dim, green, battery-powered exit signs and floor-level strips. It was just enough light to see shadows. "June," Cassio's voice was a sharp command, cutting through the dark. "Take Nico and Mina. That hallway, to the left, Orange Room 7, the sign is lit. Go. Lock the door." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed Nico's hand. "Mina, now it's a game. We're going to the safe station." I pulled them down the dark, plant-lined hallway. The green sign for Orange Room 7 inches glowed. It was a heavy, steel-plated door. Disguised as part of the wall, I fumbled with the handle, shoved them inside. It was a reinforced pantry, stocked with water and supplies, and slammed the heavy door. I turned the deadbolt. It sank into the frame with a deep, satisfying thud. We were safe. Outside, I could hear nothing but the storm, then muffled shouts, a high-pitched, piercing screech that made my teeth ache, a series of disorienting, rapid thumps. No gunfire. Cassio had told me his branches were legitimate. It seemed his security teams were, too. They weren't using bullets. Amaya was using sound, light, disorientation. Then I heard a new sound. Right above us, a scramble, a scrape of boots on the glass roof, a desperate yell, and a sickening crash, followed by a deep human groan of pain. It wasn't above us anymore. It was right outside the door. I covered Nico's ears, pulling him and Mina into the farthest corner. We waited. An eternity passed. 10 minutes. A sharp knock on the steel door. "June, it's me. We are secure." Cassio's voice, muffled but calm. "The breach is contained. One of our men is injured. He's outside your door." I fumbled with the deadbolt and pulled the heavy door open. Cade Illor was kneeling on the tiled floor, his hand on the shoulder of another North Star guard. The guard was lying on his side, his face pale and twisted in pain. His leg was bent at an angle that legs should not bend. "He slipped," Cade said, his voice tight. "The intruder he was tracking went high. Our man went after him, but the glass tiles are slick as ice. He came down hard on the terrace edge." The man groaned, a low, guttural sound. I saw the blood, a dark stain spreading on his black uniform, just above the knee, but it was the angle of the ankle that screamed at me. The panic that had been simmering in my chest vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. My mother, she was a nurse, an ER nurse for 20 years. I had spent my childhood patching up neighborhood kids, resetting my sister's fingers when she fell out of trees. I knew this. "Mina," I said, my voice crisp. "On the wall, inside the room, the red box. Bring it, now." Mina, wide-eyed, scrambled back inside and returned with the large first-aid trauma kit. "Don't move him," I ordered Cade, kneeling beside the guard. "I'm June. What's your name?" "Leo," he grunted, his teeth gritted. "Okay, Leo, we're going to get you stable." My hands were sure. I took a pair of shears from the kit. "This is going to hurt." I cut his tactical pants from ankle to thigh. It was a bad break. Compound, but the bleeding wasn't arterial. "Pressure," I told Cade. "Hold it here, Mina. I need those 2 splints and all the gauze wrap. All of it." For 5 minutes, I worked. I didn't think about Cassio, or the gray finch, or the CIB. I only thought about stabilizing the break, keeping pressure on the wound, checking his pupils for shock. My hands, which had trembled holding a photo, were now perfectly, completely steady. When I was done, the leg was immobilized. The bleeding had slowed. Leo was pale, but he was lucid. Cade looked at me, his professional mask gone, replaced by raw respect. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My mom," I said, my voice quiet. And then, the adrenaline left me. It didn't drain, it crashed. I sat back on my heels, and a violent full-body tremor took over. My hands, which had been so sure, were shaking so badly I couldn't even zip the kit closed. I was freezing, my teeth chattering, even in the humid air. A shadow fell over me. Cassio. He had been there the whole time, watching from the doorway, silent. He stepped forward, shrugging out of his dry wool coat. He didn't say, Good job. And he didn't say, Are you okay? He just draped the heavy, warm coat over my shoulders. It enveloped me, smelling of wool and him. You're cold, he said, his voice a low rumble. It's just shock, I stammered, my teeth clicking. He crouched in front of me. I was still shaking, unable to stop. He looked at me, his steel gray eyes searching my face in the dim, green light. He raised his hand and pressed his large, warm palm flat against my forehead. The gesture was so paternal, so caring, it shocked me into stillness. It was the same gesture from the bridge, but the intent was completely different. He wasn't claiming me. He was checking me. You're not feverish, he murmured, just shock. His hand didn't move. His thumb brushed, almost accidentally, against my temple. We were alone. Cade was on his radio, organizing transport for Leo. Mina had taken Nico back into the safe room to find him a juice box. It was just us. The only sound was the rain, now a gentle shoosh on the glass. The emergency systems were back on, and the air was misty. The glass walls of the conservatory fogged over. We were in a small, private world, hidden by steam and red-orange trees. June, he said. His voice was so low I barely heard it. I looked up at him. My heart was no longer shaking. It was pounding, a deep, heavy beat that matched the rain. He didn't move his hand from my forehead. He didn't grab me. He just asked, May I, he whispered. It wasn't a question about the cut, or my job, or the CIB. It was the only question that mattered in that moment. I couldn't find my voice. I just nodded. He leaned in, slow, agonizingly slow. He gave me every chance to pull away. His lips touched mine. It was nothing like I'd expected. It wasn't a kiss of ownership or passion or desperation. It was gentle. It was hesitant. It was a soft, warm pressure, a question. His lips were firm, but soft. His other hand came up, not to pull me closer, but to rest on my upper back, just between my shoulder blades, a point of solid, unwavering support. I could feel his breath, warm and steady, ghosting across my cheek. It was a kiss that listened. It was focused and tender, and it made every nerve in my body light up with a quiet, brilliant fire. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against mine, his hand still on my back. We were breathing the same air. Cassio, I whispered, my voice shaky for a different reason now. It's too fast. I need my own choices. I expected him to be angry, to be frustrated. Instead, I felt his smile against my skin. He pressed his forehead harder against mine. I can wait, he whispered back, his voice a vow. Oh, wow. So, am I interrupting the post-crisis debriefing or... Mina. I jumped back, my face burning hot. Cassio's coat, which I was still wearing, slipped off one shoulder. Mina was standing in the doorway of the safe room, her hand over her mouth, but her eyes were dancing with a grin. Cassio didn't jump, he just straightened up, his composure perfect, his gaze unbothered. He looked at Mina, then at me, and the corner of his mouth quirked. Your sister has excellent timing. The tension didn't just break, it evaporated, leaving behind something light and almost normal. Good, Amaya said, striding into the hallway, her tablet in her hand. The mood snapped back to business. Because the party's over, the breach was a feint. They used the power cut to plant this. She held up a small, blackened circuit board in a static bag, a data tap on our internal comms. They were sloppy. They were trying to find out where we moved the boy, but they left a trace. The blackmailer. Cassio said, it wasn't a question. The blackmailer, Amaya confirmed. The signal that sent you the photo of Nico, the one that coordinated the false fire alarm at the CIB, it didn't just come from a CIB server. It came from an encrypted high-level workstation, one assigned directly to investigator Rhea Candell. My stomach dropped. Rhea, no, that's not possible. She was fair. She wanted to help me. She gave me her card. She was playing you, June, Cassio said, his voice hard, trying to see if you'd flip, if you'd be a weapon she could use. I don't understand, I said, my head spinning. She's CIB. Why would she work for the Gray Finch? Trust the evidence, Cassio said, his gaze hard. She's not just a mole. She's the architect. And now we have her. So what do we do? I asked, pulling his coat tighter around my shoulders. A cold, thin smile touched Amaya's lips. She wants evidence. Miss Park. She wants a smoking gun to use against Cassio, so we're going to give her one. The night bled into a gray, exhausted dawn. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the glass house dripping and silent. Kate had taken Leo for medical attention. Mina had fallen asleep, her ukulele clutched to her chest. I was sitting on a bench, wrapped in Cassio's coat, too wired to sleep. Nico padded out of the safe room, his hair a mess. Rubbing his eyes, he saw me and walked over, climbing into my lap without a word, curling into my chest. He was holding a piece of paper, another drawing. It was a train, drawn in blue crayon, but the windows weren't squares. They were raindrops, a rain train. Underneath, in shaky, blocky letters, were 2 words. Safe station. My throat closed. Nico, did you write this? He nodded, his face proud, and pointed to my chest. You're the safe station. I hugged him, burying my face in his soft, sleep-warm hair, the tears I hadn't shed for the attack, or the kiss, or the betrayal, finally coming. It's the best thing anyone has ever given me, I whispered. I promise. Sweetie, I'm going to teach you how to read and write any word you want, starting with safe. I looked out the glass wall. The storm was over, but the world outside was obscured by a thick, wet fog that clung to the glass. The danger wasn't gone. It was just waiting. The trap was a chess move, designed by Amaya, approved by Cassio, and executed by me. It was terrifyingly simple. Amaya had analyzed the CIB's internal network, the one Ria Candel had used to send the threat. She found a secure, anonymous tip portal, a digital Dropbox for whistleblowers. It was the one channel Ria would be monitoring personally, expecting me to use if I broke under pressure. She wants evidence, Amaya said, her voice crisp in the damp air of the Seraph glass house. We were in a small office, the data phosphor kit open on the table. It looked like a standard hacker's rig. We will give her the best evidence we have, your file on Bren Walsh. But that's the real file, I argued, my stomach tightening. The audio, the spreadsheets, it's everything. Exactly, Amaya said. A fake file. She would analyze and discard. A real file. She will accept as a sign of your submission. She will open it, save it, and try to use it to triangulate our position, or, more likely, scrub it to protect her Gray Finch allies. Amaya's fingers flew across a keyboard. This phosphor is a digital signature, not a virus. The moment she saves the compressed file to her local machine, it will imprint, it will signal us. But more importantly, it will trace every network connection that file subsequently makes. We won't just know where she is. We'll know who she's talking to. I took a deep breath, my hand hovering over the send button on the CIB portal. And you're sure she'll lead us to them? She already has, Amaya said, gesturing to a map on her screen. The data tap from our system last night. The one she planted it pinged its server once before we isolated it. Pier 47, Warehouse 4, rented by a holding company called Azul Transport Logistics. The Gray Finch cartel. The plan was two-pronged. Cassio would be the distraction. Amaya would be the commander. Mina and I, we were the bait. Cassio left first. He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the stark white of his shirt making his face look even more like carved stone. He was attending the Easttide Commerce League's closing gala, the same group that had flooded the restaurant that first night. He was moving in the light, a public, high-profile target, drawing all the obvious eyes, creating an alibi so perfect, so ironclad. He couldn't possibly be associated with a grubby warehouse on the industrial pier. He paused at the door, looked at me, and just nodded. Once. Hold fast. Amaya, Cade, Mina, and I took a windowless North Star van. We were the shadow operation. Pier 47 was a graveyard of shipping containers. Smelling of rust, diesel, and dead fish, the rain had stopped, but the fog was so thick it felt like we were breathing water. Amaya and her tech team set up in the van, screens flickering. Cade and his North Star team all dressed in black, moving like ghosts fanned out, establishing a perimeter. They didn't carry heavy weapons. They carried scanners, signal jammers, and heavy-duty restraints. This was a capture, not an assault. "Mina, you're up," I whispered. My sister's face was pale, but her eyes were bright with a terrified, fierce excitement. She had her Avalon student press pass looped around her neck and her high-end digital camera, the one we'd scrimped for years to buy for her scholarship, in her hands. "Student journalism project on Ardendale's Forgotten Industries," she recited, her voice only trembling a little. "I'm the lookout. I get any shots of faces, license plates, anything that moves. You stay on the gantry. You stay in the shadow. And if Amaya says run, you run. Understand?" "Got it, June." I looked down at my own disguise, a navy blue jumpsuit, a clipboard, and a digital parcel scanner. I was a night shift inventory clerk, sent to check the Azul transport manifest. My job was to get inside Warehouse 4, confirm the phosphor signal from Ria's device, and plant a secondary beacon. I walked across the wet tarmac, my footsteps echoing in the fog. I felt completely, utterly exposed. The warehouse was unlocked. The door slid open with a low rumble. It was dark inside, lit only by a few yellow-green safety lights, and it was filled, floor to ceiling, with toys. Thousands of them, pallets stacked 20 feet high with cheap, brightly colored stuffed bears, plastic fire trucks, and baby dolls with staring, glassy eyes. "Amaya, are you seeing this?" I whispered into the tiny mic in my collar. "I see it." Her voice crackled in my ear. "It's a classic laundering scheme. They import the toys for pennies, claim a value of 10, 20 times that, pay the import tax, and the money is clean. Look for the ledgers. They'll be near the offices." I moved through the maze of silent, smiling bears. In the back, under a bare bulb, was a small, prefab office. The door was ajar. And the smell, peppermint tea. My heart stopped. She was already here. "June, report," Amaya's voice snapped. "She's here," I whispered. "I smell the tea. I think she's in the office." "Get out, now! The trap is sprung!" "No," I said, my hand closing on the small beacon in my pocket. "She's here for the file. She thinks I'm the one delivering it. I'm going in." "June, that's not the plan." I cut the comm. I took a breath. I was done being scared. I was done being a pawn. I stepped into the office. Ria Candell was sitting at the desk, my USB drive plugged into her laptop. She wasn't in her CIB suit. She was in black jeans and a dark turtleneck, looking sharp and practical. She looked up, and she actually smiled. "June, you made the right choice," she said, her voice calm and reasonable, as if we were back in her office. "I knew you were smart. Giving me the Bren Walsh file, it's the right move. It proves your loyalty." "Loyalty to who?" "Ria." I kept my voice steady, my hand gripping the small, activated recorder in my pocket. "To your own survival," she said, leaning back. "This isn't about tips. This is about him. Cassio Marcelin, he's a parasite. June, he's using you. He's using your sister. That scholarship, it's how he sinks his hooks in. He finds broken people and offers them the world, and then he owns them." "He's protecting a child," I said, my voice low. Ria laughed, a short, bitter sound. "He's using a child. That boy is his leverage, his claim to legitimacy. Do you know how many people he's destroyed? How many gray finches he's crushed? Not because they're evil, but because they're competition." "You're working for them," I said. "The people who sent that photo of Nico, the people who blew up his parents." "I'm working for balance," she snapped, her composure cracking. "I'm trying to protect this city from a man who believes he is God. I'm giving you a way out. Testify. Yes, but testify against Marcelin. Tell the CIB how he threatened you, how he moved you, how he has his own private army. Be my witness, and I will personally make sure the Gray Finch cartel and Bren and all of this vanishes. I will give you and your sister your lives back. Clean. It was a good offer. A year ago, I would have taken it. And if I don't? Ria's face hardened. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. Not of Nico. It was an old photo, black and white, grainy, a much younger Cassio, maybe 20 years old. He looked harder, his eyes colder, the carved mask not yet settled. He was standing next to an older man, a man with a brutal, vicious face, whose name I recognized from headlines and whispers Anthony the Ghost Funicello, the most ruthless boss the syndicate had ever known, before he was mysteriously retired. This, Ria said, sliding the photo across the desk, is who you're sleeping with. This is the shadow I told you about. He's not a savior. June. He's a monster who learned how to wear a nice coat. He is the syndicate. My stomach turned. I stared at the photo. The man in that picture, he was terrifying. He was everything I'd feared. I looked at the picture, and then I looked past it. Through the office window, I could see the warehouse floor. I saw the pallets of stuffed bears, the cheap dolls, the fire trucks, and stacked next to them, in identical boxes, financial ledgers, the Saffron and Slate, Radiant Entertainment, Azul Transport. It was all here, but there were no needles, no bags of powder, no weapons. Just toys and paper. Cassio's code, I will not touch a child. Even his crimes, his money laundering, he'd kept them clean. He'd kept them away from the things that truly destroyed. I thought of the wooden spoon. I thought of the paper boat. I thought of the safe station drawing. I looked Ria Candel in the eye. That's his past, I said, pushing the photo back toward her. The past isn't the present contract. The man I know teaches a little boy how to listen to the rain. The people you work for send photos of that little boy as a threat. I've made my choice. Ria's face went white with fury. She knew she'd lost. You foolish girl! You chose... Click! The lights went out. The entire warehouse plunged into the same suffocating darkness as the glass house. They're cutting the power, Ria hissed, fumbling in her bag. Amaya, now, I screamed into my mic. Thwump. A blinding, white-hot beacon ignited on the warehouse ceiling. One Amaya must have had Cade plant earlier. It lit the entire space like a stadium. All exits secure, Cade's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. This is North Star. We have the building surrounded. Stay where you are. Ria didn't panic. She ran from the office, but not for the main door. She ran to a side wall, kicked open a maintenance hatch, and pulled down a rope ladder that had been hidden in the rafters. She was already climbing. You chose your heart over the truth, she yelled down at me, her face a mask of rage in the beacon's glare. You'll regret it. She disappeared into the roof. I ran to the office. Her laptop was gone, but my USB drive was still in the hub. She'd forgotten it. The North Star team swarmed in, securing the ledgers, the computers. Cade found me by the desk, my knees shaking. She's gone, I said, my voice hollow. She got away. She didn't get what she came for, Cade said, pointing to the ledgers his team was bagging. This is the real prize, the entire Gray Finch financial spine. Broken. Amaya was at my side, her face calm. Ria was a loose end. This, she held up the zip-locked bag containing the stacked ledgers, is the end game. She can't hide from this. We'll feed it to the SEAL Court. They'll freeze every Gray Finch asset by morning. Bren Walsh will be the first domino to fall. The SEAL Court, another name I didn't know. Another invisible piece on Cassio's board. My phone buzzed, a restricted number. A single, two-word text from Cassio. Well done. I sank into the office chair, my head in my hands. We didn't go back to the Skyward apartment. Amaya declared it compromised. We stayed at the glass house, now guarded by a full North Star contingent. That night, I watched Mina sit at a small piano in the conservatory, her fingers finding the notes for her Safe Station song. Her scholarship was real. Her future was bright. This was what I'd fought for. Nico found me, and he was practicing his letters on a small whiteboard. He held it up for me to see. He'd drawn another boat, a big one, this time, with a tall mast, and underneath, in wobbly, backward letters, he'd written his first complete word. June? I pulled him into a hug, my heart feeling too big for my chest. He was learning to write, to find his voice. We were safe. The next morning, Cade Iller met me by the red orange trees. His face was grim. Amaya asked me to do a final sweep of the Skyward property before we clear your things, he said. The apartment was clean, but we found this. He held up his tablet. It was a picture of my old front door, apartment 19B. Someone had carved a small, perfect image into the wood, right over the peephole. A small, gray sparrow. Rhea was gone, but the Gray Finch cartel knew exactly who I was, and they knew where I lived. The shadow was still there. The carving of the gray sparrow on the skyward doors wasn't just a threat. It was a message. We were inside. We can get to you. No wall is high enough. The serif glasshouse, which had felt like a fortress, now felt like a fragile bubble. Amaya declared it compromised. Cassio's response was immediate and final. "We're not moving to another safe house," he said, his voice flat. "We're going home." We didn't just move. We ascended. The Arclight 512 climbed out of the low-lying fog of the harbor line, leaving the industrial noise and the smell of the sea behind. We drove up the winding, private roads of Crown Vale, the air growing thinner, cleaner, and colder. We were going to Marcellin House. I braced myself. I was expecting, I don't know, a gaudy monument to power, gold faucets, marble statues, a house built on intimidation, like something from a movie. The house that materialized from the early morning mist was not that. It was built of dark timber and river stone, a massive structure of glass and wood that seemed to grow organically out of the mountainside, not sit on top of it. It was less a mansion and more a modern fortress that had made peace with the surrounding forest. It was huge, yes, but it was quiet, and it was watching. The inside was the same. No vast, echoing marble halls. The entry opened into a great room with a 20-foot-high ceiling, but it was anchored by a massive stone fireplace that was already crackling with a real fire. The furniture was deep, comfortable, and covered in soft wools and leathers. The walls were lined with books, thousands of them on real wooden shelves. It was a home. "Amaya will get you settled," Cassio said, already moving toward a different wing. "This wing is the heart of the house. The south wing is my office. The two do not mix." Mina, Nico, and I were led down a warm, carpeted hallway. Mina stepped into the room Amaya indicated for her, and she just stopped breathing. It wasn't enormous. It was perfect. One wall was soundproofed cork. A gleaming digital piano sat in the corner, next to a high-spec computer loaded with what I recognized as professional music production software. "This is," Mina whispered, her fingers ghosting over the piano keys. "This isn't a guest room. This is a studio." Nico, however, was already running, pulling me by the hand. "June, come this one." His room was at the end of the hall. I pushed the door open, and my breath caught. The walls were a soft, deep navy blue. The entire ceiling was painted as a perfect map of the night sky, with hundreds of tiny, fiber-optic stars that glowed and dimmed in a slow, peaceful rhythm. A constellation projector sat on his dresser. A low, comfortable bed was piled with soft blankets. It wasn't just a kid's room. It was a universe, a sanctuary designed to make a small, scared boy feel infinite, not trapped. He ran to the French doors and pulled them open, tugging me onto a stone terrace. The fog was burning off, revealing a terraced herb garden tumbling down the slope, the damp air rich with the scent of rosemary and thyme. Nico scrambled down one level and carefully, with the same focus he used on his drawings, pinched off a few leaves from a familiar-looking plant. He ran back and pushed the leaves into my hand. "Mint," he said, his voice clear and proud of the word. "For the tea." to stop the worry. I closed my hand around the leaves, the sharp, clean, green scent stinging my eyes. I was so tired of being afraid. That evening, we met in the study. Firelight, leather chairs. Cade stood by the door, a silent sentinel. Nico was upstairs, asleep under his personal stars. Cassio was direct. We are here because the threat from the gray finch is no longer passive. The rules of this house are absolute. He looked at Cade, then at Amaya. 1. No weapons are permitted in the common areas or the family wing, ever. All hardware is secured in the south wing. 2. His gaze fixed on Amaya. No business is discussed where the boy can hear it. None. He is a child, not a soldier. He looked at Cade. 3. The perimeter is absolute. No one in or out without my direct code and visual confirmation. Then his gaze, gray and steady, landed on me. Mina was sitting next to me, taking it all in. 4, Cassio said. Any decision regarding your safety, Mina's or Nico's, June has final approval. If she feels a move is too risky, if she is not comfortable with a plan, we find another way. He paused. She has the veto. I stared at him. I felt the air leave my lungs. Amaya's eyebrows shot up. A veto. In his world, he wasn't just protecting me, he was respecting me. He was giving me the one thing I had never had in my entire life: control. A thick, hot lump formed in my throat. I couldn't speak for a moment. I just nodded. Okay, I said, my voice thick. Then I have a decision. Cassio just waited, his hands steepled, his face calm. This Saturday, I said, finding my voice, I want a no-screen Saturday. No security tablets in the common rooms, no business calls, no dark suits in the hallways, unless it's a code-red emergency. We're a family. We cook. All of us. And I saw a lake on the drive up. We take Nico for a walk. Cassio looked at Amaya, who looked like she was about to protest the security breach. He simply raised an eyebrow at her. Amaya, you'll learn to make pasta. He looked back at me, and the corner of his mouth quirked. It's a good rule. Saturday was bright, cold, and achingly beautiful. The air up here didn't smell like the harbor. It smelled like pine and cold stone. The lake wasn't a pond. It was a vast, deep blue mirror hidden in a valley on the estate, ringed by yellowing aspen trees. Cassio led us to a small, clean boathouse. A sleek, silent electric skiff was moored at the dock. Nico, you're the lookout. Look for fish, Cassio said. Nico ran to the bow, his face serious. Mina, you're the navigator. Aye, Captain, Mina said, giving him a mock salute, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. Cassio looked at me. June, you drive. I can't, I stammered. I don't know how. Then I'll teach you. He stepped onto the boat, holding his hand out. I took it, and his grip was warm and solid. He guided me to the small console. He stood behind me, his presence a solid wall of heat at my back. This is the throttle, he said, his voice a low rumble, very close to my ear. It's not a car. It's not a gas engine. It's silent. It responds to the water, not the road, gentle. I pushed the lever forward. The boat glided from the dock, slicing through the water with only a faint, humming sound. It felt like flying. As we cleared the cove, the wind hit us. It was sharp, cold, and smelled like snow. It whipped my hair across my face, making me gasp, and I overcorrected, the bow swinging too far to the left. Easy, his voice murmured. Don't fight it. Feel the current under you. Move with it. His hand, which had been resting on the back of the seat, moved. It didn't grab the wheel. He placed his large, warm palm lightly on my waist, just above my hip. It wasn't a grab. It was a steadying presence. A point of anchor. I was suddenly aware of everything at once. The sharp, cold wind raising goosebumps on my arms, the solid heat of his palm seeping through the fabric of my sweater, grounding me. His chest, a solid wall at my back, shielding me from the wind. I could smell the wool of his coat and the clean, cold scent of the lake. I steadied the boat, my breathing shallow. He cut the motor in the middle of the lake. The silence was absolute, complete. The only sound was the soft lap, lap, lap of the water against the hull. Mina and Nico were at the bow, trailing their hands in the icy water, trying to touch the reflections of the clouds. Cassio's hand was still on my waist. "You're good at this," he said, his voice quiet in the vast stillness. "You learn fast." "I'm good at surviving," I said, my gaze fixed on the ripples spreading out from the boat. "I don't want you to survive. June," he said, "I want you to live." I felt his thumb brush, almost imperceptibly, against my hip. "If I asked you to stay," he said, his voice even lower, "after all this is done, if I asked you to stay here, with me, with Nico," he paused, "what would you fear the most?" The question was a direct hit, too honest for this beautiful day. I gave him the truth. "Losing myself," I whispered. "I've spent my entire life being what someone else needed, a daughter, a sister, a waitress, a witness. I'm afraid if I stay, I'll just become yours. I'm afraid of forgetting who June Park is." His hand tightened, just slightly. "Then I'll hold on to her for you," he said, his voice a low, rough promise. "You can have her back whenever you ask." My heart ached. I turned to face him, my back against the console. The boat rocked gently. His eyes weren't steel today. They were the color of the deep lake water, dark and full of unknown currents. This time, I didn't wait. I didn't wait for permission. I rose on my toes, tangled my cold fingers in the collar of his coat, and pulled his face down to mine. This kiss was not the first one. That was a question. This was an answer. It was deeper, surer. His hand slid from my waist to the small of my back, pulling me flush against him. His other hand came up, his fingers tangling in my wind-blown hair. Cupping the back of my head, his lips were firm and warm against mine, and the chill of the lake air vanished, replaced by a deep, coiling heat. He tasted like mint from the garden. I felt his breath hitch. A moment of sharp surprise before he responded, taking control, his mouth moving over mine with a possessive, breathtaking intimacy. It was a kiss that said mine, a promise, a claiming. It didn't go further. It didn't need to. It was a 500-page novel in a single touch, all set to the quiet soundtrack of the water lapping against the hull. Click! The sound of a camera shutter. We broke apart, breathing hard. My face was burning. Mina was standing on the middle bench, her big camera aimed right at us, a huge, wicked grin on her face. "Wow," she said, lowering the camera. "Definitely adding this to my new collection. It's called The Adults Need a Safe Station 2 series. This one's a keeper. June, the lighting is perfect." I groaned, hiding my face in Cassio's coat. He didn't look embarrassed. He just looked at Mina, then at me, and a low, genuine chuckle rumbled in his chest. "We're heading back," he said, "before your sister decides to sell the photos." The warm, safe bubble of our no-screen Saturday burst at 10 o'clock that night. After Nico was asleep, Amaya requested a meeting in the study. The fire was low and the mood was tense. "It's done," Amaya said, her voice flat. "The SEAL court acted on the ledgers from the warehouse. They've frozen every known asset of the Gray Finch cartel. The ITA, the Interlateral Trade Authority, is preparing a formal raid on Bren Walsh's properties. He's the primary signatory on all the Azul transport accounts. He's the domino." "So, it's over," I said, a wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy. "We got him." "No," Amaya said, her dark eyes hard. "Ria Candel is gone. She didn't just walk out of the CIB. She walked out with 2 armed federal agents who were supposedly guarding her. She's in the wind, and Bren is panicking," Cassio finished. Amaya nodded. "He's terrified. He knows the ITA is coming for him, and he knows the cartel will try to silence him before he can be arrested. He's trying to flip. He wants a deal." I breathed. "He wants you," Amaya corrected. "He sent a message through a cutout. He won't talk to us. He won't talk to the CIB. He'll only talk to June Park. He says he has the real dirt on Finch, the stuff that wasn't in the ledgers. He wants to trade it for protection." "It's a trap," I said instantly. "It has to be. He's working with Ria." "Maybe," Cassio said, his gaze fixed on me. Or maybe he's just a desperate rat trying to find a new ship. He wants to meet at the Lumen Tea House. Amaya said, downtown, tomorrow at noon. It's public, dozens of cameras, high visibility, low risk of direct action. I looked at Cassio. My stomach was churning. I hated Bren, but real dirt. It's your decision, June, Cassio said, his voice quiet. He was honoring his rule, the veto. I took a deep, shaky breath. If I go, will you be there? I'll be outside the door, he said. You'll wear a wire. Kate and his team will be the busboys, the other customers, and the street sweepers. But the choice is yours. I'll go, I said. The Lumen Tea House was bright, full of glass, steam, and the smell of jasmine. I felt sick. Kate had fitted me with a tiny microphone, disguised as a button on my blouse. Bren was already there, huddled in a corner booth, looking like a ghost. He was shaking so badly he was spilling his tea. You came, he whispered, his eyes darting around the crowded room. June, you gotta help me. Please. What do you have, Bren? I said, keeping my voice cold. They're gonna kill me, he whimpered, sliding a small silver hard drive across the table. It was heavy. This is everything, not just the money. The other imports, the ones they moved after Cassio's father-in-law died, the ones that broke the treaty. My blood ran cold. Father-in-law Lys's father. This is my life insurance, nah, Bren stammered. You give this to Marcellin. You tell him I'm sorry about your sister. I was squeezed. Just get me out. Get me to the ITA, please, June. I'll see what I can do, I said. Sliding the hard drive into my bag, I stood up to leave. Wait, he hissed, his hand shooting out, grabbing my wrist. His skin was damp and cold. You tell Marcellin. The Finch cartel, they're not afraid of him. Not really. They know his rules. They know his code. What are you talking about? Bren's eyes were wide with a terror that went beyond the CIB, beyond the gray Finch. They're afraid of the shadowless man, he whispered, his voice cracking. The one who follows him, the one who really runs the board. Tell him that. Tell him the shadowless man is moving again. I pulled my wrist free and walked out. Cassio was waiting in the arc light. Parked in the alley, I got in, my hands shaking. Amaya was in the front seat, a headset on. I put the hard drive on the console. He's terrified. He said something about a treaty and a father-in-law. Amaya and Cassio exchanged a look, a dark one. And, I said, my voice quiet, he said they're not afraid of you. They're afraid of the shadowless man. The car, already silent, went dead. The air thickened. Cassio, who'd been calm, who'd been a warm presence on the lake, turned into the man from the restaurant, the carved stone. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury I had not seen since the night he first saw me. He wasn't just angry. He looked shaken. He looked at Amaya. Amaya closed her eyes. Her face was pale. Gods, she whispered. What? I demanded. What is that? Who is that? Cassio's voice was a low, dangerous growl. Amaya! Amaya met my gaze. Her dark, professional eyes were filled with something new, a cold, old fear. It's not a person, June. It's a code name. It's the name we gave to a traitor, someone who was inside the Marcellin family, years ago. Someone who knew everything. Someone, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. We all thought was dead. The name Shadowless Man landed in the car like a bomb. Cassio didn't speak for the entire ride back to Crown Vale, but the silence in the arc light was a living, breathing thing. It was cold, sharp, and terrifying. We didn't go to the family wing. We went to the south wing, to his real office, a place of cold glass, dark monitors, and zero comfort. Amaya plugged Bren's hard drive into a secure, isolated terminal. The drive was exactly what Bren had promised. It wasn't just ledgers, it was a roadmap, shipping manifests, bank transfers, offshore accounts, all detailing a complex network. Hololight, Amaya said, her voice tight as she read the screen. The Hololight Fund, it's the fake charity Ria was using. This is it, Cassio. This is the entire financial structure of the Gray Finch." She scrolled, her fingers flying, tracing the flow of money. "It's all here. Payments for Azul Transport, Radiant Entertainment, Bren Walsh." Then she stopped. Her hand froze over the keyboard. "Amaya." Cassio's voice was a low growl. "Cassio," she whispered, "look at this." She highlighted a line item, a recurring monthly transfer, coded as Project Easttide Security. The recipient, North Star Guardians. My blood turned to ice. Cade, the man who had organized the teams, who had protected Leo, who had secured the warehouse. Cassio didn't move. He just hit a black button on his intercom. "Cade, my office, now." Cade entered a minute later, still in his black tactical gear, his face calm. He saw me, saw Amaya, saw Cassio's expression, and his professionalism hardened. Cassio didn't speak. He just pointed to the glowing line on the screen. Cade looked at it. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "That's the Easttide contract, sir," he said, his voice perfectly level. "It's the official protection detail for the Commerce League. It's our largest public-facing account. It's legitimate, fully declared, and on the books. It's not a bribe. It's our job." "It's money from the Gray Finch," Cassio said. "It's money from the Hololight Fund," Cade countered, his voice sharp but respectful, "which, until 10 minutes ago, we all believed was a legitimate charity funding the League. They paid us. We provided security. If they were laundering the money they used to pay us, that's on them. It doesn't make us complicit." He was right. It was a perfect firewall. "He's clean, Cassio," Amaya said, her eyes scanning the data. "The payments are declared. That's not the problem." She kept digging, scrolling through encrypted subfolders. "This," she breathed, her voice dropping. "This is the problem." She pointed to a corrupted data file, a shadow in the code. "This hard drive was accessed recently, not by Bren, by a high-level hardware key, a physical decryption device. Software couldn't have left this signature. It's a Marcelin-level key. Cassio, one of yours." The implication hit me like a physical blow. The money from North Star was a distraction. The real breach was that the shadowless man, the traitor, was still inside Cassio's network. "Get out," Cassio said. Cade looked at him. "Not you. Everyone else. Seal the wing. No one in or out." The security staff vanished. It was just the four of us, Cassio, Amaya, Cade, and me. Cassio's face was terrifying. It was the stone mask from the restaurant, but colder. He walked to a high-tech panel on the wall, one I hadn't noticed. He pressed his thumb to it. The small, glowing red lights on the internal security cameras clicked off. We were blind. "On the desk," he said, his voice a low, lethal command. "Your phones, your earpieces, your keycards, every piece of tech, now." We placed them on the glass desk, a small pile of our connections to the world. Cassio stood at the head of the table. He didn't look at the pile. He looked at us. He looked at Amaya, his oldest friend. He looked at Cade, his most trusted guard, and then his steel-gray eyes met mine. "The leak is not out there," he said, his voice vibrating with a controlled, Arctic rage. "It is in here, in this house, one of you." The silence that followed was so heavy it was hard to breathe. Cade's jaw was rigid, Amaya's face was pale, but her eyes were furious. "You're wrong, Cassio," Amaya said. "Am I?" He shot back. "A hardware key. Only 3 people in this house have that level of access. You, Cade, and now June's is linked to mine." "This is insane," like Cade said. The tension was a physical thing, a high-pitched whine in my ears. The low, angry rumble of their voices was building. Then a sound. Creak. The heavy study door, which had been left ajar, swung open an inch. A small, pajama-clad figure stood in the shadows. Nico. He was holding his stuffed fox, his eyes wide and sick with fear. He must have woken up, followed the angry voices. He was trembling. "June," he whispered, and the sound was so small, so broken, it shattered the rage in the room. Cassio's face broke, the mask of stone dissolved, replaced by a deep, profound anguish. He closed his eyes. I didn't ask permission. I was out of my chair in a second. "Hey, sweetie," I said, my voice deliberately soft and light. I scooped him up before he could see the faces in the room. "The grown-ups are just being loud again. It's okay. You know what, I think I left my sweater on the terrace. Can you help me find it?" I carried him out of that toxic room, into the cold night air of the family wing. The wind was sharp. He was shaking, his small face buried in my neck. "It's okay," I murmured, sitting on one of the stone benches in the herb garden, pulling a thick wool blanket from the chair and wrapping it around both of us. The moon was bright, and the fog was far below us, a silver ocean over the harbor. "I was scared," he whispered. "The voices were—" "I know," I said, rocking him gently. "I know. It's just grown-ups get stuck sometimes. Remember I told you I'd teach you how to make a boat sail against the wind?" He nodded, his cheek rubbing against my shoulder. "Well," I said, my gaze on the distant, dark water, "sometimes the wind is loud and scary. It blows and tries to push the boat back. But the boat is smarter than the wind. It doesn't fight. It doesn't try to go straight through. It turns its sail. Just a little, and the big, scary wind actually pushes it home. It's just a different way of moving." He was quiet, his breathing slowing. He leaned his full weight against me. "Home," he whispered. Mina's studio door was open down the hall. She'd seen me carry Nico out. I saw her watching me from her piano, a strange, thoughtful expression on her face. Later that night, as I sat with Nico, helping him fall back asleep under his stars, I heard it, a soft, looping melody drifting from her room. It was my tune, the little, absent-minded tune I hummed when I was stressed, when I was worried, my worry motif. She had heard it. She had recorded it, put it on a loop, and woven it into a soft, calming piano piece. She had taken the sound of my anxiety and turned it into Nico's new lullaby, the safe station song, finally complete. It was almost 2 a.m. when I went for water. I saw Amaya. She was in the main security nexus for the family wing, her face lit by the blue glow of a screen. She was actively changing the house's master security protocols. "Amaya," I whispered, "what's wrong?" She looked up, her face grim. "I trust Cade. I trust well. I trust Cade, but I trust Data more." I ran a diagnostic on all active hardware keys in the house. She held up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside it was a black key card, identical to the ones on Cassio's desk. "I found this," she said, her voice barely audible, "tucked into the lining of Cade's duty coat, which was hung in the mudroom. It's a duplicate, and it was used at exactly 14:30 today, when the file was breached." My stomach turned to ice. "No." "Cassio is indisposed," she said, her euphemism for furious. "So I'm handling it. We're confronting him." Cade was brought to the nexus. He was in his sweats, clearly woken up. He saw the bag on the table, and his face went from sleepy to white to a dark, furious red. "That is not my key," he said, his voice lethally quiet. "That's a plant. You know it, Amaya." "The logs don't lie, Cade," she said, her voice full of regret. "It was used at 14:30, right when you were prepping for the lumen meet." "Wrong," Cade snapped. He wasn't scared. He was furious. "I wasn't prepping. Pull my body cam footage, now. The CIB archives. My escort detail for June." Amaya's fingers flew. She brought up the file. "I was fitting her wire," Cade said, his voice tight. The footage clicked on. It was his point of view, me, in the car, looking pale and nervous as he threaded the tiny mic onto my button. The timestamp on the footage was bright green 14:28. He had a perfect alibi. He was physically with me when the key was used. Someone had not only planted the key on him, they had used it while he was with me. If Cade didn't use the key, Cassio said. He had entered the room, his face a gray mask. Amaya was already typing. The key wasn't used in the south wing, it was just synced from there. The signal, it's weak, but it's active. That's impossible. What? Cassio demanded. The signal, Amaya whispered, staring at her screen. It's coming from inside this wing, from Nico's playroom. We moved as a single, silent unit. Cassio, Amaya, Cade, and me. We crossed the hall, the star-filled ceiling of Nico's bedroom visible through the open door. We went into his playroom. Amaya's tracker led her to the large wooden toy chest. The signal was strong. She began pulling out toys, soft bears, wooden blocks, coloring books, and a bright red metal toy truck, heavy, durable, old-fashioned. The signal was coming from inside it. Cade took a delicate electronics toolkit from his belt. He removed 2 small screws. The bottom of the truck fell away. It wasn't a toy. Nestled inside the hollow metal frame, wired into the toy's axle, was a tiny, sophisticated circuit board, a hardware key, rigged to draw power from the truck's wheels. My God, Amaya breathed. Every time he played with it, it synced. Cassio's face was broken. He knelt, picking up the heavy, violated toy. Nico, he whispered, his voice cracking. Nico, woken by the voices, was standing in his doorway, rubbing his eyes. Nico, sweetie, I said, my voice thick, this truck, where did you get this truck? Nico just pointed, his face sleepy. Uncle Vale, he said, yawning. For my birthday, he said it was special. Vale. The kindly, elderly butler, the man who had been with Cassio's family for 30 years, the man who brought Nico warm milk, who always had a kind word for Mina, the man who had been the one constant in Cassio's life. He was brought to the study. He didn't even try to deny it. He just collapsed into a chair, looking 100 years old. My daughter, he whispered, his hands shaking so badly he clasped them together. Eliza, the doctors, her condition, it's rare. The medical bills. He was sobbing, open, messy sobs. $500,000. Mr. Cassio. They said they would pay it. The Hololight Fund. They said it was a grant. A gift. Who? Vale? Cassio's voice was agonizingly quiet. The woman. The nice woman from the charity. She said, just carry this toy to the playroom. Just plug this in when you dust the office. She said no one would get hurt. Just data. Just numbers. Cassio was shaking. His hands were clenched on the desk, his knuckles white. The pain in his eyes was so profound I couldn't look. The betrayal was absolute. He looked at Vale, this broken old man. Then he looked at the doorway, where Nico was peeking in, terrified by the sobbing. Cassio took a deep, shuddering breath. He composed his face. Cade, he said, his voice impossibly gentle. Please take Mr. Vale to his quarters. Get him a glass of water. See that he is comfortable. He looked at Vale. We do not humiliate our family. Vale, not ever. And especially not in front of the children. Vale looked up, his face streaming with tears of shame and gratitude. Mr. Cassio, I'm so sorry. Vale wasn't the shadowless man, Amaya said, after he was gone. He was the mule, but he's our only link to the handler. Vale, it turned out, agreed to set a meet. He would do anything to make it right. Where? Amaya asked. He has to tell his handler he has the hard drive from Bren. They'll choose the location, Cade said. No, I said. The 3 of them looked at me. We've been reacting, I said, my voice shaking but firm. We've been played. It's time to set the board ourselves. We choose the location. I thought of the wind, the noise, the boat. Halcyon Pier, at dusk, right when the tide changes. Why? Cassio asked. Because the wind off the harbor is brutal there, I said, the plan forming in my head. It's too loud for parabolic mics, and the pier itself is old. The entire structure shudders. It makes all the security cameras shake. It's useless for clear surveillance. They'll think they're safe because it's chaotic, but we'll control the ground. Cassio looked at me, a long, searching gaze. The anger was gone, replaced by that deep, lake water gray. You're not scared, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm terrified, I said, meeting his eyes, but being scared isn't a reason to stop. Amaya set the meat, Vale sent the message. The response from the shadowless man's handler came back an hour later on a secure text app. Halcyon Pier, dusk. Vale brings the hard drive, and the girl brings the payment. Payment, Amaya said, her blood running cold. They didn't specify. A second text arrived, just as she spoke. The child or the ring? Amaya looked at me, confused. What ring he doesn't mean? Cassio's face was white. He was staring at my left hand. It was bare. He had never given me a ring. But the shadowless man knew. He knew the one thing Cassio would give me, the one thing that mattered. He didn't just know the business. He knew the heart. Halcyon Pier was a skeleton of rust and splintered wood, jutting out into the black, churning water. The tide was turning, and as I'd predicted, the wind was a living thing. It howled, a high-pitched, mournful shriek that vibrated in my teeth. It was so loud it was almost silent, a wall of noise that drowned all other sound. The heavy, old-fashioned pier lights, the ones that hadn't been broken, swung wildly, throwing long, distorted shadows that danced like ghosts. Vale was at the end of the pier, a small, frail figure in the chaos. He was clutching a padded envelope, the one containing Amaya's data phosphor hard drive. He looked like a sacrifice. I was 20 yards behind him, tucked into the shadows of a defunct ticket booth, my heart hammering against my ribs, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I was wearing a wire, but the wind was so loud I doubted Amaya could hear anything but static. "Amaya, comms check," I whispered. "Static June. We read you barely." Kate is in position. North Gantry. He has eyes on Vale. Her voice was a clipped, digital ghost in my ear. "Remember the protocol. 28 seconds. We have one chance." 28 seconds. The window of time her signal jammer would scramble the Gray Finch network when we gave the word. The handler's text had been clear. The child or the ring. I looked at my bare left hand. The ring was the bait, a sign that the shadowless man knew Cassio's heart, but the child that was the terror. A figure emerged from the fog at the landward end of the pier. Not from a car. They just materialized. A tall, slim shape in a heavy, dark raincoat. The hood pulled so low it was impossible to see a face, a long shadow in the gloom. "Vale?" A voice crackled, distorted by a synthesizer. It was the same sound as a ransom call. "You have the package." Vale, to his credit, was a good actor. He held up the envelope, his hand shaking. "I have it, just give me the papers, the ones that clear my daughter." The handler glided forward, moving with an unsettling, fluid grace. "Where is she?" the distorted voice demanded, scanning the shadows. "The payment, the woman who holds the boy." This was it. "I'm here." I stepped out of the shadow of the ticket booth. My hands were at my sides, open. I took exactly 3 steps onto the main pier, putting me in the full, swinging light. The handler stopped. The faceless hood turned toward me. "I'm the one you want," I said, my voice ripped from my mouth by the wind. "I'm the payment. I don't trade children. I came to end this." The handler's head tilted. A low, distorted chuckle crackled. "You—" "Now, Amaya," I whispered. In my ear, I heard Amaya's sharp command, 28 seconds, go. The handler suddenly tensed. They must have felt the jammer hit. They looked down at a device on their wrist, a trap. But they didn't look at me. They looked past me, out, toward the sea. I saw it too. A dark, low-profile boat, no lights, had cut its engine and glided up to the pier's side, and leaping from the boat onto the lower landing, a dark, unmistakable figure. Cassio. It was a diversion. He was pulling the handler's attention, dividing their forces. The handler moved. They didn't run at me. They ran at him. They moved with a speed that was not human, pulling a collapsible baton from their coat. "No!" I screamed. Cassio was coming up the steps, but the handler had the high ground. Cassio braced, but the attack was brutal and fast, a single vicious thwack as the baton connected with his shoulder. I heard the sound, a sickening crack, even over the wind. He went down. He didn't just stumble. He dropped, one knee hitting the splintered wood, his arm hanging limp, his face a mask of white-hot pain and shock. The handler raised the baton for a second strike, aimed at his head. My world went red. All the fear of Bren, of the CIB, of the ring, of the shadow, it all burned away, replaced by a pure, white-hot, protective rage. I ran. I didn't think. I just moved. As I ran, my mind, in a moment of perfect crystalline clarity, flashed. I wasn't here. I was at the Marcelin house, in the warm, safe music studio. Mina was at the piano, her fingers finding the notes for Safe Station, her melody, my melody. And Nico was curled on the rug, safe, building a tower of blocks, listening to the music of his new, unbroken family. They were safe. My focus snapped back to the pier. This was my family, too. "Why, get away from him!" I screamed. I launched myself, a flying, useless projectile, aiming for the handler's back. I wasn't fast enough, but I was a distraction. The handler turned, surprised by my sudden, suicidal attack. At that exact moment, Vale, who had been frozen in terror, threw the envelope. "Here, take it." The handler instinctively spun to catch the drive. As they did, I heard a faint psss from the gantry above. Cade, not a bullet, a tracker, a tiny, infrared paint-loaded pellet, no bigger than a grain of rice, hit the back of the handler's raincoat, invisible in the dark. The handler grabbed the envelope, realized it was the wrong one, looked at me, at Cassio, at Vale, then up at Cade's position. They knew. The trap was sprung. "Fool!" the voice shrieked. The handler threw something at the ground. It wasn't a grenade. It was a magnesium smoke canister. It exploded with a blinding hiss, enveloping the pier in a thick, acrid, gray smoke that stung my eyes and choked my lungs. Total blinding whiteout. "June?" I heard Cassio cough, his voice raw with pain. "I'm here." I dropped to my hands and knees, crawling through the smoke. I found his arm. "Cassio, I'm here." "Can't see." He grunted, trying to get up. His left arm was useless. The smoke was disorienting. I couldn't see the land, the sea, nothing. We were blind. "Amaya, we're blind," I yelled into the mic. "The target is gone." "Static June, get him to hard cover, get off the pier." I grabbed Cassio's good arm, pulling it over my shoulder, and he was a dead weight, but I was running on pure adrenaline. "Up," I grunted. "Lean on me. I'm your safe station. Remember, move?" He got his feet under him. We staggered through the chemical fog. "Which way?" he gasped, his eyes squeezed shut against the smoke. "Listen," I commanded. I closed my own eyes, blocking out the chaos. I listened past the wind, bonged the deep, rhythmic chime of the channel marker buoy, the sound I'd used to ground myself. It was to our left. "This way I hear the bell. Follow the sound." Like I'd taught Nico to listen to the rain, I was guiding Cassio by sound. I pulled him, half dragging, half carrying him, off the main pier and onto the solid concrete of the harborside path. "Warehouse," Cade's voice boomed from somewhere. "Get to the warehouse." I saw the dark shape of a corrugated steel wall, a side door. I grabbed the handle. Locked. Of course. "He's hurt," I yelled. Cassio, leaning heavily against the wall, his face pale and sweating with pain, just shook his head. He lifted his good foot and slammed it sideways, a single, powerful, focused kick just beside the lock. The wooden frame splintered. I threw the door open and we fell inside, into the pitch-black, musty-smelling darkness. I slammed the door, fumbling for a lock I couldn't see. "It's okay," Cassio breathed, his back sliding down the wall until he was sitting on the concrete floor. "We're safe. Just for a minute." The only light was a thin, gray sliver from a high, dirty window. The only sound was the storm outside and our own ragged breathing. I knelt in front of him, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't control them. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only terror. You're hurt," I whispered, my voice trembling. "My shoulder dislocated, I think maybe broken." He was trying to catch his breath. The baton metal core. He was starting to spiral, the pain and the shock taking over. "Cassio," I grabbed his face, my cold, trembling hands on his rough cheeks. "Hey, look at me." His eyes, wild and unfocused, finally locked on mine. "Look at me," I said again, my voice low and firm. "I'm here. You're not on the pier. You're with me. Breathe. Just breathe with me." I took a deep, shuddering breath. He matched it. Another. His pupils, which had been wide and black, started to focus. He was present again. "June," he whispered, his voice rough. He looked at me, kneeling in the dirt, covered in smoke and grime, and a look of such profound something crossed his face. I didn't think, I couldn't. I leaned in the dark and pressed my mouth to his. It wasn't the lake kiss. It wasn't the glass house kiss. There was no romance. It was oxygen. It was desperate and grounding and a fierce, unspoken promise. It was "I thought you were gone." It was "I'm here." It was "We are alive." It was short, hard, and it tasted like salt and fear and iron. I pulled back, resting my forehead against his, just as I had in the kitchen. "We're alive," I whispered. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "We're alive." My earpiece crackled, making me jump. June Cassio status. It was Amaya. We're safe," I said, my voice shaky. "In the warehouse. Number 1, he's hurt, but he's conscious." "Stay there," Cade's voice cut in. "We're coming. Amaya, I have the tracker." "Where?" Amaya demanded. "It's moving. Fast. The handler is on foot, headed for Warehouse 3, the abandoned cold storage. It's the only weak point in the perimeter. We're moving in." "June." Cassio grunted, forcing himself to his feet, using his good hand to brace against the wall. "We have to go. We have to see." "You can't." "I can," he said. He was pale, but the stone was back in his face. "This ends. Now." We got to Warehouse 3 just as Cade's team was stacking on the door. It was a squat, windowless concrete box. "Go," Cade commanded. The team breached. They poured inside, fast and efficient. We were right behind them. The warehouse was empty. No handler, no struggle. Just a single, dark raincoat pooled on the damp floor in the center of the room. And lying on top of it, gleaming under the beam of Cade's flashlight, was a ring. It wasn't just any ring. It was an antique, a large, square-cut, deep green emerald set in heavy, old gold. I looked at Cassio. He had gone completely. Utterly white. He wasn't looking at the coat. He was staring at the ring, his breath hitched, his good hand shaking. "Sir?" Cade asked, his voice tight. Cassio just shook his head, his eyes fixed on the ring, his expression one of dawning, ultimate horror. "That's not possible, Wan," he whispered, his voice cracking. That's not possible." "Cassio, what is it?" I said, touching his good arm. He looked at me, his gray eyes shattered. "It's my mother's," he whispered, his voice choked. It was buried with her." The trail wasn't cold. The traitor wasn't just inside his business. They were inside his life. They had been to his mother's grave. The shadowless man wasn't just a ghost. He was a ghoul. We stood there, the reality of the violation sucking the air from the room. They were gone. The trail was dead. They had won this round. "No," I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through the silence. Cassio looked at me, his face hollow. "No," I said again, my mind suddenly clear. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp certainty. "We're done. We're done chasing shadows. We're done reacting." "June, the trail is cold," Amaya said, her voice heavy with defeat. "They're gone." "So we stop chasing," I said. "We make them come to us." "Where?" Cade asked. "We don't have a location." I looked at all of them, the plan forming, clear as the harbor light. Yes, we do. The one place they'll feel safest, the one place they'll be overconfident, where they think we'd never dare to act. Tomorrow. The Harbor Line Street Festival, in the middle of 10,000 people. Amaya looked at me like I was insane. That's an uncontrolled civilian risk. It's the most controlled risk, I countered, my voice gaining strength. They want me. They want Cassio. We'll be there. Out in the open, they won't be able to resist, and they'll be so busy looking for your teams, Cade, that they won't see my team, the waiters, the stagehands, the volunteers, the people they ignore. Cassio was staring at me. The shock in his eyes was slowly being replaced by that deep, lake-water gray, by the fire I'd seen in the glass house. "You're proposing we use you as bait, in a crowd," he said, his voice rough. "I'm proposing we set the stage," I said. "I'm done being the bait. It's time for me to be the trap." He looked at me for a long, silent moment, the wind howling outside. He saw the waitress, the witness, the survivor, and he saw the strategist. He rested his forehead against mine, just as he had in the kitchen, a gesture of absolute, terrifying trust. "All right, June," he whispered, his voice rough with pain and a new, burning resolve. "I trust you to lead." The Harbor Line Street Festival was a riot of noise, light, and life. After so many days spent in the sterile silence of safe houses and the cold tension of Cassio's study, the sudden, overwhelming humanity of it all was a shock to my system. The air smelled like fried dough and popcorn and the sharp, briny tang of the Atlantic. Strings of colorful paper lanterns crisscrossed the street, bobbing in the wind, bathing the crowd in a warm, chaotic glow. This was my plan. This was the controlled chaos I had gambled on. "And the next winner of the Harbor Line raffle is ticket number 481, I yelled into the microphone, my voice bright and fake. I was on the main community stage, dressed in jeans and my old saffron and slate jacket, playing the part I knew best, the harmless, friendly, local girl. I was the bait, hiding in the most obvious place of all. Amaya's trap was invisible. To my left, a free festival photo booth was doing brisk business. It wasn't just a photo booth, it was an infrared and facial recognition scanner, cross-referencing every face in the crowd against the data from the Gray Finch ledgers. Cade's North Star team was here, but they were dressed as dads, street vendors, and bored-looking roadies. The music swelled. I looked over at my sister, who took center stage with her ukulele and a borrowed microphone. "This is a new one now," Mina said, her voice clear and strong over the speakers. "It's called Safe Station." As her melody, our melody, began to weave through the crowd, I scanned for my anchors. I found Cade. He was in the front row, blending in perfectly, a baseball cap pulled low. And sitting on his shoulders, high above the crowd, was Nico. He was wearing a pair of bright red, industrial-strength, noise-canceling headphones, just like I'd insisted. He was safe from the noise, safe from the triggers. He was just a little boy at a festival, waving a glow stick in time with his aunt's music, a massive grin on his face. Seeing him so safe, so happy, steeled my spine. I could do this. A figure approached the side of the stage. Not a guard, not a threat, a woman in a simple windbreaker, her hands in her pockets, a baseball cap pulled low. She looked like any other festival goer. But I knew her. Rhea Kendall. She looked up at me, her face pale in the colored lights, her expression not one of anger, but of pity. "June," she said, her voice quiet, but it carried to the stage. "Get off the stage. Come with me. This is your last chance." "It's over, Rhea," I said, my hand tightening on the microphone. "Over?" She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "He's poisoned you. Can't you see I'm trying to save you? I'm trying to save that boy." She pointed at Nico, who was happily oblivious, bopping his head to Mina's music. "You're handing him over to a monster. Cassio Marcellin isn't a protector. He's a cage. I'm trying to liberate Nico from that toxic dynasty." Her motive, I realized, wasn't just money. It was a twisted crusade. She'd told me Cassio had ruined her mentor, some old guard boss from the days of Antony Funicello. This was her revenge. She actually thought she was the hero. "You threatened him," I said, my voice low and dangerous, dropping the MC brightness. "You sent me a picture of him. You work for the people who left him an orphan." "I did what was necessary," she hissed, her composure cracking. "Family isn't blood, Rhea," I said, my voice rising, my words carrying over the mic. "It's not a dynasty. It's the people who show up. It's the people you choose." "He's made his choice," she shrieked, and she raised a small, black device in her hand, a detonator. At that exact second, a series of deafening bangs erupted from the pier, a bloom of red and green sparks. Flares. The crowd screamed, a wave of panic rippling backward. This was her diversion, the Gray Finch team. My earpiece crackled. "It's handled," Amaya's voice said, calm as ice. "Flares, not explosives. They were intended to start a stampede. We've remotely activated the dock's emergency fire suppression water cannons. The crowd is safe." The panic died as soon type. Rhea's face went white. Her diversion had failed. She spun, her escape plan B kicking in. She ran, not for the street, but for an open maintenance tunnel under the main stage, her escape route. But a figure stepped out of the shadows of the tunnel, blocking her path. It was Vale. He wasn't dressed as a butler. He was in his simple, old man clothes. He looked frail, but his hands were steady. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a single folded piece of paper. "Miss Candell," he said, his voice surprisingly firm, "I cannot let you pass." "Get out of my way, old man," she snarled, trying to push him. "My daughter," Vale said, his voice breaking. "She wrote this for me, after I cooperated." He held up the note, his hand shaking. "It says, 'Thank you, Father, for still being a good man. I'm so proud of you.'" He looked at Rhea, his eyes streaming with tears. "I'm a good man, Miss Candell. Please don't make my daughter a liar." It was the one weapon no one had anticipated, a conscience. Rhea stopped. She stared at the letter, at this broken old man who had found his spine. That single second of hesitation was all it took. "It's done," Cassio's voice said in my ear. He wasn't on the pier. He was in the command van, a block away. "The full HoloLight file has just been transmitted to the ITA and the SEAL Court. Every account is frozen. It's over. June. She has nothing left." Rhea knew it, too, her face contorted in a mask of pure, desperate rage. She had one last move. She raised a different device, a small data transmitter. "If I'm going down," she screamed, "I'm taking you with me." She was aiming it at the festival's main broadcast hub. "I'm uploading everything how the Marcelin Syndicate planted a Waitress to spy in the CIB. The whole world will know who you are." She was trying to poison me, to paint me as the villain. I looked at her. Then I looked at the main festival livestream camera, the one broadcasting Mina's performance to the entire city. I dropped my microphone. I walked right up to the camera until my face filled the screen. "My name is June Park," I said, my voice shaking but clear. The crowd hushed, watching the screen. "A few weeks ago, I was a waitress at the Saffron and Slate. I saw my boss stealing from his staff, and I saw him exploit my sister." Mina's music softened, becoming a soundtrack. "I was scared," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I was terrified I'd lose my job, that I'd be homeless. But I decided to speak up. I decided that being scared was not a reason to stop." The crowd was listening now, rapt. "The people I spoke out against, they are powerful. They threatened me. They threatened my family. But they made a mistake. They threatened a little boy I love, a boy who isn't mine by blood." I looked right into the camera, my eyes burning. "My name is June Park, and I am the person who will always protect a child that is not my own. My family is not for sale." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. They were cheering, whistling. They saw me. Not a spy, not a victim, just June. Rhea stood frozen, the data transmitter useless in her hand. I had taken her last weapon, the narrative. Amaya and Cade stepped out of the crowd, their movements calm and precise. Ria Candel, Amaya said, her voice quiet but carrying. By the authority of the SEAL Court, you are under civilian retention for transfer to the Interlateral Trade Authority. Ria didn't fight. She just deflated. The shadowless man was gone. It was just a woman who had lost. The chaos was over. The adrenaline left me in a rush, and my knees buckled. June? A small body slammed into my legs. It was Nico. Cade had lifted him off his shoulders, and he'd run to me, his headphones dangling around his neck. "You were on the big TV," he yelled, his voice bright. I pulled him into a hug, burying my face in his hair, my heart feeling too big for my chest. "You were so brave," he whispered. Then he pulled back, his face serious. "I have the payment." "What, sweetie?" He fumbled in his pocket. The bad lady, she wanted the payment, the ring." He held out his small hand. In his palm was a small, crudely whittled ring, made from a piece of soft wood. He must have been working on it for days. He'd used a wood-burning tool to carve one. Shaky word into the top. H-O-me. My breath hitched. Nico. He took my left hand and pushed the wooden ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. "Now you're home," he said, beaming. I was sobbing. Real, ugly, happy tears. When I looked up, Cassio was standing in front of me. He'd taken his jacket off. His left arm was in a sleek, black medical sling. But he was here. He'd been watching from the edge of the crowd. And his eyes, the stone was gone. The ice was gone. The man who never showed emotion, who ruled a city's shadows, his eyes were wet. He looked at the wooden ring on my finger. He looked at Nico, who was hugging my legs. He looked at me. And in the middle of the Harbor Line Street Festival, surrounded by thousands of people, Cassio Marcellin dropped to one knee. My hands flew to my mouth. "June Park," he said, his voice rough, but it carried. He didn't have a microphone, but the world went silent. He didn't take out a diamond. He just looked at me. "You don't need my name. You don't need my protection. You are the strongest person I have ever known." He took a shaky breath. "But I need you, and I know Nico needs you. You are our safe station. June, you are our home." He reached out with his good hand, not to touch me, but just open. "Will you be his mother formally, legally?" He swallowed, his gaze locked on mine. "And will you be my companion, my partner, my everything?" I was crying too hard to speak. I didn't say yes. I grabbed his good hand and pulled him to his feet. I pulled him close, my arms wrapping around his neck, his good arm locking around my waist, holding me so tight I couldn't breathe. The paper lanterns bobbed above us, casting us in a warm, golden light. Mina, seeing it all, started playing Safe Station again, this time not as a ballad, but as a bright, soaring anthem. I kissed him. In front of the entire city, I kissed him. It was a kiss of promises kept, of battles won. I could feel his heart hammering against mine, a wild, frantic rhythm that matched my own. It was the taste of salt and mint and the overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful taste of future. The crowd roared. Mina's song swelled, and the people around us, who had heard my speech, who had seen our story, they started to sing. They picked up the chorus, this anthem my sister had written, and it became a street-wide hymn. Nico, watching us, his face the brightest I had ever seen it, laughed, a real, loud, joyful laugh, and he shouted, his voice clear as a bell, full of a 5-year-old's perfect, simple truth. "Mom, June?" The days that followed were a blur of order. The law, when wielded correctly, was as powerful as any army. Bren Walsh, faced with the full weight of the ITA, was convicted on multiple counts of financial crime. The Gray Finch cartel, their accounts frozen by the SEAL Court, their leadership exposed, simply dissolved. They imploded without a single shot fired. Ria Candel, facing charges from both the ITA and the CIB, disappeared into the federal system. Her crusade over. And Vale, who had chosen his daughter's letter over his fear, was given community service. which he served in the new music program Mina was running at the Avalon shelter. A week later, we were on the terrace at Crown Vale. The city was celebrating the end of the festival with a massive fireworks display. Nico was asleep, his head in my lap, his small hand clutching his wooden fox. Cassio sat beside me, his good arm draped around my shoulders. The sling was gone. He took my left hand, lifting the little wooden ring to his lips, kissing it. "He's a better craftsman than I am," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's the only one I'll ever need," I whispered. "I know," he said, "but I have something else for you." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a ring, the square cut, deep green emerald set in heavy gold. "Amaya's team found it," he said, his voice quiet, all the old ghosts laid to rest. "It was in Ria's private safe. She had an obsession. She dug up my mother's grave. She took this." He looked at me, his gray eyes clear in the exploding, colorful light. "I want you to have it," he said, "not as payment, not as a brand. My mother, she was trapped by this life, by the old rules, by the syndicate." He slid the heavy, cold ring onto my right hand, beside the warm, wooden one. "This ring doesn't buy you. June, it's not a contract. It remembers. It remembers that we chose each other. You chose to fight. I chose to change. And he brushed his knuckles over Nico's hair. He chose to call you Mom." The fireworks burst over Ardendale. Bright gold and green and red. I leaned my head on his shoulder, Nico breathing softly in my lap, his good arm holding us both. We were safe. We were a family. We were home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on our journey. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you can, please hit that support button to help this story be heard by more people. Your support means the world.